Okay, looks like we're live. Good evening, everybody. I'm Professor McCoy. These are some of my friends who are going to be joining me in responding to a video today. The thumbnail should give some of it away, but I was introduced to this from Adam, so he'll give us a brief introduction to what we're going to be watching and listening to. It is hopefully, I mean, he'll hopefully go a little bit quicker than previous videos because it's only 12 and a half minutes, but. All right, go ahead, Adam. Let us know what we're in for here.
Yeah, okay. So I was in contact with this gentleman before the live stream. I kind of wanted to know his story and why he came to the conclusions he did. I ended up watching a few of his other videos to kind of get greater context. This gentleman is about, I want to say 25, 26-ish. His name is Cade. He grew up Catholic. Um, Went to mass. He
But to
his
clarify, to clarify, it's this gentleman from the thumbnail,
yes,
not
yeah,
not either of the people on screen. Just to
no,
clarify.
that the yes, the gentleman in the thumbnails whom I'm
Mhm.
referring to. His name is Cade. He's about 26, 27-ish probably now. He grew up in a Catholic family. His family was very traditional. Went all the way through Catholic school. Went to a Catholic college. He found out that he had a homosexual orientation around fourth grade, so he was always kind of struggling with that. And then around the age of 21, he realized that all of the arguments he had been taught for the faith just didn't make sense to him, especially the moral arguments. We will see how well he understood them as the video goes on. But he is someone who just was very much in the Catholic camp and then completely became a secular liberal. He told me that he was at one point studying to possibly become a monk or a diocesan priest, possibly SSPX. He never did answer me on that front. But he said I knew all the arguments, I knew all the apologetics. I was debating non-Catholics even on the topic of homosexuality, and then he said I finally realized that the church's arguments just weren't doing it for me anymore, and he deconstructed his faith and became a secular liberal atheist, and is now apparently a happy gay man in a relationship and everything. So he just really took a complete 180. But yeah, we'll definitely see some of his misconceptions, and he has a lot of hatred for the Catholic Church and what it stands for, especially on matters of sexual ethics, as we'll see.
What do you bring me into? You dragging me into these.
Professor, I'm sorry. You can just call me the cringe finder because I just find these videos and I'm like, the professor needs to react to this.
I did ask for this, to be fair. Now,
Yeah.
Imzip, who is often in the chat, did not ask for this. He just asked to join in this discussion because he thought it'd be fun for some reason. But we'll see. All right, so let's not delay any further. Let's get into this and see how it goes.
Look at Kevin's body. You're not tolerated. Did I just violate the nature of a chair? You don't need birth control. You don't need gun control. You need self-control. I'm gay. All of us have something.
Okay, I was about to earlier before we started. I let the first like half a second of this play before we started, and I said, "Man, this is just bad editing." He just starts right off the bat with right into speech, and I didn't see where he was going with this. And this is actually kind of a clever introduction. It's the little. I feel like it's going to be mean spirited, but I I take back what I said off stream about him not editing well. This is not bad. Anyway,
In our lives that we hate about ourselves.
What if I told you that chairs prove that being gay is sinful? You might laugh, but if you were a faithful Catholic like I was, you might remember this talk that now has over 1 million views. Father Mike Schmitz is a celebrity priest with a #1 podcast with tons of books out there. Catholics love this man. He is not fringe.
Oh no, I was about to say two #1 podcasts. Actually, did
Two, yes, two.
yeah, did both Bible in a Year and Catechism
Yes.
in a Year get to #1? I know Rosary
I
in a
believe
Year did this year, but I know he's not doing that one. So
I believe Catechism in a Year also got to #1. Yes.
okay, when was this from? Is this an older video, or did he just not include that?
I mean, I don't know how old this gentleman's video is, but I do know the original video he's reacting to
Oh.
is fairly old.
Right. Which, by the way, I should mention, you'll find Father Mike's original talk, the whole thing, full 50-minute talk in context. I've linked that in the description of this video. this live stream already, as well as our presenter here, the one we're watching right now. So if you want to watch either of those, they're both linked below. That is, I thought, pretty standard procedure for reaction content, but he didn't link it. So anyway,
Yeah, so he's gonna get into a little bit of his like. I'm qualified to speak on this because I studied all the apologetics of Catholicism and I know how to debunk them because I know all the arguments inside and out, and yeah.
I'll wait till he says it before I make fun of it.
I spent years as a card-carrying Catholic, as an apologist. I even met Father Mike in person. I went to college to pursue a degree in this type of theology. So today I want to debunk this talk that kept me in the closet for years. Let's jump into it.
None of what I'm going to talk about.
Okay, so first of all, kind of tying it back a little bit to our last video. Card carrying Catholic is a little. I assume what he means by that is practicing, right?
That kind of reminds me of, because when you're a Knight of Columbus, you carry a card in your wallet
Oh,
that
maybe
literally says, if you're hurt, contact a Catholic priest. Like if someone finds you and you're on your deathbed.
I wonder if that's what he means. If that was an allusion to that sort of thing, because that's not just like Knights of Columbus. That's a relatively common thing that honestly I ought to do. I wonder if that's what he means. Because I was going to tie it back to the last time we did one of these reaction streams to the guy who became a Marxist and why card carrying became such a synonym for dyed in the wool believer in something was because of the Communist Party. Like this Communist Party USA had like membership cards that everybody had, and that was one of the they stopped using the membership cards during the McCarthy hearings and things like that. Oh yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah, and like on the back of it, it has like a little text. Like, it's kind of hard to see because of the reflection, but it says, in case of accident, illness, or need of the member to whom this card was issued, please notify a priest. And then it says but then it cuts off and just has ellipses. So, but this is when we said card carrying Catholic, this is what I imagine.
I kind of now have to wonder if that's what he was after. But the other thing, though, the thing I said I was going to make fun of, is the bad reputation that we cradle Catholics tend to have. Because I am also, for anybody who doesn't know, I'm a cradle Catholic. I grew up Catholic. I didn't go to Catholic school, but I went to CCD as a kid growing up. We went to church all the time. Not every week, we probably should have. So I grew up like somewhere in between a cultural Catholic and a practicing Catholic, somewhere in that gray area between there. And I'm like very lucky, by the grace of God go I but by the grace of God go I for this sort of thing. Not that I particularly experience same-sex attraction or anything like that, but that I could very well have been one of these sort of apostates that got lured away by something because I wasn't particularly serious about my faith, right? So yeah, that there is that stereotype of, well, I went to Catholic school, but that stereotype exists absolutely for a reason. Maybe that's
something I think it's super common. It almost seems as if Catholic school makes you non-Catholic for some reason. It's like the kind of gist you get.
Yeah, maybe that says something about the state of Catholic education. Maybe, unfortunately, at least some of Catholic education. I don't want to malign everyone and everywhere, but there is that unsettling tendency for sure. Then the other thing too is that he was studying. He says this kind of theology, and I have to wonder exactly what that means. I don't know.
I hope he doesn't mean moral theology, because in his other videos, his moral theology is atrocious. So,
well, there you go. I mean, my guess is,
I sincerely hope for his sake that his branch was not moral theology.
My guess is that he probably did not go beyond undergraduate studies in maybe theology.
I can confirm that is the case, because when he left college, he left Catholicism.
Well, there you go. Yeah, so you don't usually specialize before grad school in terms of theology, right? So if you're going to get a degree in theology as an undergraduate, which first of all I will note is exceptionally rare. Most universities, even Catholic universities, don't have a theology undergraduate program. And if they do, it's unspecified. You're not gonna specialize in in moral theology, you're not going to specialize in any particular area of theology. You might, if you're very lucky to find one, you might have a program that is a bachelor's in theology. But yeah, maybe it just means Catholic theology. Maybe, I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah. The other thing too, and this is me diving down a wild rabbit hole. The idea of a bachelor's of theology is also a bizarre modernism. Anyway, if you go back to the medieval origins of the university, a bachelor's degree was a liberal arts degree. That's just by definition what it was. And then you had master's degrees in specific subject areas, including theology. Like theology was one of the primary master's degrees. And then you also had things like law, medicine. Those are the two that come to mind, but there are more. But master's degrees were the specialized ones, especially theology. So if you the idea of a bachelor's of theology is a weird contradiction in terms from a medieval standpoint, which is kind of where I metaphorically live.
Who knows? Maybe this gentleman, and again, I mean, I only had one brief conversation with him, but I believe maybe this gentleman studied too much theology and not enough philosophy. And from what I've been told by very smart clerics, that if you have bad philosophy, it's going to corrupt your theology.
Yeah. As a philosopher who studies some theology, yes, yeah, absolutely. This is, by the way, the topic at hand is not really a theological question. Not really.
It's more of an ethical one.
Yes. There are theological approaches to the question, right? And those are mostly to do with sacramental theology and things having to do with the symbolic relationship between the masculine and feminine as embodied in Christ and the Church, and the mirroring of the sacraments of matrimony and holy orders and things like that. But otherwise, yeah, this is almost entirely a topic of philosophy, specifically of ethics. I mean, maybe he studied philosophy a little bit, but not well.
Not well. Yes.
That's not fair. That's not fair. I want to be fair here, because you can do a great job of studying philosophy and still not come away understanding anything about what Father Mike is saying. Because I know this because I have a lot of colleagues who are brilliant people who are incredibly well read and know their philosophy brilliantly, but the moment I bring up anything like teleology or hylomorphic dualism or any idea older than 200 or 300 years, their minds are just utterly blown, and I have no idea that these thoughts even ever existed. And I mean this literally. Like, the idea of hylomorphic dualism, like, shattered the foundations of, momentarily he got over it, but momentarily shattered the foundations of a fellow grad student's mind, because he was studying like early modern thought. Like post-Descartes, a lot of post-Descartes figures, and the idea of mind and body not being two substances was just like,
well, not to give too much of a spoiler here, Professor, but
oh no,
our reactor here is going to basically mock the concept of teleology as a whole.
Of course he is. Everybody does that. It's all Hume's fault. I'd like to issue a challenge, by the way. Not a challenge, more like a request. For anyone who studies Hume intensively, to explain to me his arguments, pick your favorite, as if I had never heard them before. Explain to me his argument against his objection to teleology, as if I've never heard it before. Explain to me his is-ought gap, as if I had never heard it before, and why there is such a gap. Explain to me the problem of induction, as if I had never heard it before, and try and convince me of these in a rational way. I don't think any of them are the least bit coherent, and I have read the original text. I think Hume is question-begging nonsense, and nothing more, and that question-begging nonsense has ruined all of philosophy since then. So, yeah, if you particularly study Hume, even tangentially, and you want to give this a try, even if you don't agree with him, I'd be interested, because maybe there is a perspective here that I'm not seeing, but his arguments seem to me to be comically bad. So I kind of have to assume maybe I'm misreading something or missing something. Like, but who knows? All right, let's keep going.
About today has anything to do with tolerance.
Well, we're off to a fantastic start.
In the church, you're not tolerated by the church. Not only that, you're not accepted by the church. The truth of the matter is, you belong in the church.
So this is an hour-long talk, and Father Mike spends about the first 5 minutes talking about how he doesn't like the name of the talk because he doesn't believe in tolerance, because tolerance is something that you do to other people, but gay people belong in the church. I like the sentiment, but it's entirely vacuous. What he's saying is, you can feel gay, you just can't act on it. Now that we have the pleasantries out of the way, let's get into his actual argument.
That's planned for you as a
Okay, so I think that he's skipping over the point of what Father Mike is saying here, because this isn't just pleasantries without substance. I think that there is a real substantial point to be made, and that he is... I'm assuming, maybe he will talk about this a lot more going forward, but I think here is a key part of the disagreement that he's going to wind up having, which is that what should I call our presenter here? I didn't actually even check to see what his channel name was.
Well,
I don't want to...
his name is the Gay X Trad.
Gay X Trad. Okay,
Yeah,
sure. Let's go with that. I'm just going to call him Gay for short. So the Gay here is saying that... I'm not going to be able to keep this up with a straight face, but I'm going to try. He's saying that his assumption is that sexuality, as we understand it in the modern sense, homosexuality or even heterosexuality for that matter, or whatever, is an essential part of our being. It is what defines us as a certain kind of person, right? Whereas Father Mike is denying that outright. And he does deny that outright in several places throughout this talk in particular. I don't know if he addresses that directly, but that is, I think, where the split is happening, because that's usually where the split happens. Right.
Bingo.
Thoughts on that matter, or should I try and keep going? What do you think?
I mean, you hit the nail on the head, Professor. He completely has absorbed the modern leftist liberal notion of the fact that sexuality is apparently so fundamental to my identity that if you say I cannot act on my sexuality, you are denying me the freedom to be who I am. And that is very upsetting.
Okay, yeah. Does he go so far as to say he's anything like denying my existence? Because I hear that a lot, and I have a video specifically about it.
He doesn't go that far. He will go on to claim,
Okay.
and he actually did claim to me during our conversation.
Mm-hmm.
He believes that the church basically keeps all those who experience same-sex attraction. They just keep the church. They keep those people in the closet, and they don't know what the church doesn't know what to do with same-sex attracted people. Was his direct quote to me. The church does not know what to do with same-sex attracted. As if there's something we need to do something with, because they're not normative.
Sort of like saying that a thief says, well, I'm a thief, I'm naturally greedy, so I should be allowed to act on my impulses because I'm just a naturally greedy person. So I think that's sort of the perspective that the church kind of takes, is like, well, your sin is going to hurt other people or yourself, so therefore it's not something you should live out.
And he has an objection to that, as we will see.
Yeah. And I mean, to the point of not knowing what to quote do with closeted homosexuals, to use the worldly term. Yeah, I don't know what he would be asking for. Aside from just accept them living in a constant and dispositional state of mortal sin, which no. And if you're going to argue that the church, the reason we ought to find flaws in this kind of natural law reasoning is because because it keeps people in the closet in this sort of unnatural state, then that's just question begging. You're assuming that this is a sort of unnatural state. and that is something essentially that is in some way suppressing the fundamental essence of the person in some way. And so there must therefore be something wrong with the reasoning that gets you there, right? It's just question begging. It is assuming that this is a bad conclusion, and so there's something must be wrong with the reasoning, rather than actually putting forward an argument for what's wrong with the reasoning. Which, I mean, maybe he does. Maybe he does. We'll see if he gets there.
He's definitely going to try, Professor, and I will leave your judgment to that on whether or not he succeeds.
My guess is negative, but we'll see. Hey, Baze, how you doing? Baze says in the chat, anyone who's used porn for long enough can tell you that sexuality is plastic. Yeah, I mean, there are plenty of examples of porn use distorting one's sexual proclivities, let's say, in the like short to medium term, and in some cases even one's like sexual orientation in the sort of broad term, right? In the long term, if you take such things to be, essential, then they're malleable, and so malleability and essence are two incompatible types of things. Right? So yeah, I think that there is absolutely clear evidence of sexuality and sexual identity and these sorts of things dramatically changing over time, usually as a result of porn use, of trauma, of sometimes serious moral effort. That's presumably possible. It has borne fruit in some cases, at least. Let's put it that way. Not saying universally, of course, but it can. But right, I mentioned that I have a video on exactly this point, the point that I think is the major point of contention. It's on the inversion of essence and accident that the left, both politically and theologically and ethically and morally, the left broadly speaking, however we want to categorize that, something that deeply characterizes their way of thinking is inverting essence and accident. Right? They take accidents to be essential to us, and they take our essences to be mere accidents that can change over time. Right? That my essence as a human being is malleable because I wasn't a human being since the moment I began to exist. I was something else for a while. Right? I can cease to be a human being before I die, if I have sufficient bodily or brain damage. Similarly, I am essentially. Yeah, go ahead.
That sort of ties into abortion. Now that you bring that up, sort of the idea that I wasn't fully human when I began, so exterminating someone like that is not murder because it's not a human, it's not a person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Right. They don't take essence to be a not to borrow a term, but they don't take it to be binary. They take essence, if anything, to be a sort of collection of features. And that once you accumulate enough of them, then okay, you're this thing now, right? By contrast, though, they don't treat certain accidental properties that they really, really like and really think are important. They don't treat those like that, right? So sexuality, identity characteristics, right? The ordinary elements of the sort of progressive stack. They treat those things as essential to our being, right? In a way that we don't take. In the way that they don't take, say, gender or sexuality or things like that to be.
And I've dialogued with plenty of leftists, and the common refrain that I keep hearing when I try and bring up this distinction is that there is no such thing as essences, which our presenter is going to try and make a similar claim, talking about the natural law. We're going to get there. He's going to deny that there is no such thing as nature, and this concept called natural law, it is descriptive and not prescriptive. But we'll get there.
Mm-hmm. I as I've said before, I not to beat the dead horse of hypocrisy, but I don't think he believes that. I think that if you dug deep enough, you would see that he absolutely would contradict that if pressed on the right issues. Sexuality being one of them, right? I do absolutely think that he thinks that there's something essential about say, homosexuality. Absolutely. And I do think that he does think that there is something, I've talked about this before in the context of Ralph McInerney and his arguments, sort of following up on Alistair McIntyre on sort of the basis, the meta-ethical basis for natural law, that we all always act as if we are pursuing something that is intrinsically valuable. If we actually didn't think anything were intrinsically valuable, in other words, worth pursuing, not just that I want to pursue it, then we would not pursue it. We wouldn't do anything. Any action whatsoever has within it the implicit assumption that things are intrinsically valuable. Certain things are and certain things are not. And certain things are intrinsically of themselves better than others for us to do. And we can be right about that or we can be wrong about that. And you, in any action, you think you're right about it, necessarily.
Right. Maybe to play a little devil's advocate here, because trust me, I've had plenty of conversations like these with liberal folk. But I think you're right, Professor. I think they would say it's intrinsic, like it's not just something they want, it's something intrinsic. But I would also, kind of putting their mindset on for a second here, I think they would also claim that it is subjective to them. I'm the one placing the value on this thing. So this thing might not have value to you, but my sexuality has value to me, therefore I can act in however way I want because I've given it such a high value subjectively.
Yeah, so
it is intrinsic, but it's also subjective to them.
Is he going to talk about... Okay, you've seen the video. Does he talk about this specifically? Should I wait? Because I can address this fully now if you want to, but then we'll just kind of be hemming and hawing when he gets to the point. Saying, oh yeah, as we've said above.
I do not recall. I honestly think we need to let Father Mike make his point and then let...
That is true. Yeah, we'll hold off, because I'm probably just going to bring up a passage from Ethica to Mystica. That's that kind of thing.
I don't... Having seen the full video of our presenter here, I don't want to misremember things and put words in his mouth.
Absolutely fair. Okay, yeah, good point. So, all right, let's keep going for a while, and then we'll see what's going on.
Human being is that your body and soul are together.
I don't get it. Could you provide me an example, Father Mike?
Could you come forward, please? Could everyone just look at Kevin's body?
I take it all back. I did not need an example. That was like weirdly creepy.
If you are your body, then what you do with your body matters.
Once again, nobody is saying that what you do with your body doesn't matter.
The nature of the thing is what it...
Dude, he missed the point entirely. Missed the point of look at Kevin's body. I remember this talk really specifically. Do you remember what the point was? Anybody? No? Okay, so what he said immediately after, he said to the audience, okay, look at Kevin's body. And then immediately after he says, okay, now look at Kevin.
Kevin is his body. You cannot have Kevin without...
Exactly. He was making a point there against Gnosticism or against substantialism. That was the point of that. And to make that close connection between our existence and our corporeality or our embodiedness, is to say that the body is part of our essential selves. Now, if you're just going to deny essence and deny teleology outright, then it doesn't really matter if we're bodies or souls, fundamentally.
Isn't that the same logic that I think Nestorians used to say that, well, Mary is the mother of Christ, the human, but not the mother of God?
Yeah, it's man, so many of these heresies just wind up boiling down to Christological heresies. Yeah, it's Gnosticism of a sort, right?
Like I said in the beginning, bad philosophy corrupts theology.
Yeah. Well, I think that he's just missing the point, and he's trying to dismiss it.
Right? Yes. He, as you will see, Professor, he is just dismissing a lot of what Father Mike is saying. Mm-hmm. He's just like, I've already come to my conclusion, therefore I must dismiss all of his conclusions.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean,
so his quote unquote debunking of Father Mike is not that strong because he does not himself put forward arguments in favor of his own.
Yeah, I guess part of what we'll wind up having to do is watch along, and as we go, I will jump in to sort of correct those weird misconceptions that he brings up, in part. Because, like I said, I did not watch this recently, but I have watched it a few times because it's a great talk, and it makes a lot of points exceptionally well. I do really recommend it. Like I said, link in the description. Not right now. Wait till we're done. But it's it is a shame that he doesn't deal with it both seriously and honestly, because I do think this is a really, at least so far, like that right there was a big red flag for me, that was a disingenuous approach, that he was jumping over the point that Father Mike was making, and there's no way that you could jump over that point by accident. Anyway, let me go back a few seconds.
You keep correcting him. I'm gonna try and keep playing devil's advocate a little bit, because I've interacted with some of the individuals who think this way. That
Gotcha. No, absolutely. That is absolutely a useful role to have, for sure. But yeah, I'm going to go back a little bit. Everybody else started the section at 112, right? It moved for everybody?
Mine didn't move.
Uh-oh.
I'm at 135.
Did that work?
Oh, there we go.
Oh, there we go.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
I have to hit play for it to move for everybody. All right, that makes sense. Okay, here we go. Beginning of this section. Let's see where it goes from here.
God's plan for you as a human being is that your body and soul are together.
I don't get it. Could you provide me an example, Father Mike?
Could you come forward, please? Could everyone just look at Kevin's body?
I take it all back. I did not need an example. That was like weirdly creepy.
If you are your body, then what you do with your body matters.
Once again, nobody is saying that what you do with your body doesn't matter.
The nature of a thing is the what it isness of a thing.
What he's doing is laying out the idea of teloi or teleology, which is this Catholic understanding that everything in the universe has an invisible blueprint in it, and this tells us exactly what things can and can't be used for. Let's jump into how we can figure out.
So did he give a correct
No,
explanation, understanding of teleology there?
not even fucking close. Okay, good lord. Okay, so he's getting this idea from a mistranslation of Aquinas filtered through William Paley and probably David Hume.
So it's
Probably some of the new atheists, if I had to guess too. So to explain, okay, I'll set this aside. I'll come back to it. There's an argument in there's one little bit in Aquinas' Fifth Way, the argument from teleology, where Aquinas describes things tending towards their ends not accidentally but designedly. Designedly, that word is the common translation. I forget what the Latin is. I should know this offhand. I don't know offhand. I could find it. But it's not designedly in the sense of a blueprint, right? It's designedly in the sense of intentionally. Right? It is in alignment with the designs or intentions or outcomes intended by an agent, right? So that's what he's talking about. But the term design gets carried forward primarily in English translation to a lot of 19th, 20th century philosophers who turn this into an argument from something like intelligent design. And so this gets sort of boiled down to William Paley is the guy who did the clockmaker analogy. Like if you find a clock laying on the beach, a perfectly working pocket watch, you have to assume that it was designed by somebody. And so if we see irreducible complexity in the animal kingdom and among biological organisms, we have to assume they were designed by somebody, right? This was critiqued very heavily in the early to mid noughties by the new atheists, Dawkins especially, because it bears no reference whatsoever to teleology as classical philosophy understood it. Teleology is not about the design or the blueprints of something. Blueprints, as we understand them today, from an architectural standpoint, do not have teleology in them. There is no final cause. There is no end. There is no goal in the blueprints. Right? The blueprints represent a formal cause, not a final cause. And that's mostly what modern sort of intelligent design arguments are about. What get called teleological arguments usually are just arguments from formal cause.
So if we wanted to be more teleological about it, could we make an argument from intelligent intent as opposed to intelligent design.
Something like that.
Changing
Yeah, something like that.
a little bit.
The big problem we usually wind up with there, though, is that the modern mind balks at intentionality in general. Right? So, for example, I often have a lot of trouble getting my students to distinguish between an intended end and a foreseen consequence. Right? So, for example, if I were to, an example I use all the time, this is actually from the Model Penal Code to distinguish between knowing and deliberate crimes, right? Basically between first and second degree murder. If I'm backing out of my driveway and I see my neighbor's bike sitting behind my car, but I'm late for work and I decide to back out of my driveway anyway and run it over, I did not intend to run over the bicycle. I intended to get out of my driveway and get to work on time. If instead I see the bicycle behind me, I get pissed off because he's always leaving it there, and I say, you know what, I'm going to teach you a lesson, and I'm going to get to work on time in the meantime, so I'm just going to back over your bike, and maybe I'll use an excuse later and say, I needed to get to work on time, right? But my intention was to teach you a lesson for leaving your bike behind me. Then it was intended. That was the end of my action. But that's very different from something that I foresee as a consequence of my actions, but I don't intend directly. Students have a really hard time. By students, I mean just sort of modern people. A lot of all of us, like, because this is something that was difficult for me to grasp too. To be fair, we have trouble getting our minds around this. Right? The difference between what I intend and what I foresee as a consequence. Right? The consequences of my actions, I get that. I can figure that out. What I intend with my actions, what was I trying to do? What was I aiming towards? That's actually something we have some difficulty about. Right? Partially just because it requires, a level of cognition that is beyond that of a 3-year-old, but we're not used to doing that all the time. But beyond that, just because it's not part of our sort of common level philosophical landscape, if you will. Right?
Professor, if I may,
go
ahead.
Mm-hmm.
So like the thing that I'm thinking, or a similar argument, would be that God wanted Christianity to begin in the Roman Empire because the Roman Empire had good roads, and that would make proselytizing a lot easier than it would be if they didn't have good roads, if they were in a different empire.
Mm-hmm.
So sort of like the logic there is like, well, God's smart enough to allow this to start here because it'll make it easier or make it, run along more efficiently.
I think even that doesn't quite align with teleology, with final causality, right? Because it would have to be something like, if you were to make a teleological argument about that point, you would have to say that God's purpose in allowing, directing, inspiring, whatever, the Roman architects to build their network of roads was to allow for the rapid spread of Christianity. Which I'm not quite comfortable saying that. I don't think that's actually accurate. Right? I think that is something that man did, that God employed, that God used for his own holy purposes, right? I don't know where I was going with that. But does that make a difference? Is that
yes?
Yeah. Okay.
It's more of the consequence rather than it actually being the intended purpose.
Right. Yeah. So.
And yeah, when we get farther into the video, there's a chapter that he labeled or somebody labeled it
Sex is for procreation, this one?
Yeah, sex is for procreation. And
it says only. Oh, sorry. It's the title of the chapter is "Sex is only for procreation," which is
procreation. Yes,
which he missed something there.
Yeah, he is going to argue, and you're going to have to correct him on that. But he is going to argue that, like we've been saying, procreation is a consequence of sex, but it is not the intent of the sexual act.
Okay, that's dumb. Moving on.
So,
we'll get to it.
We'll get to it, but
another great example I like to use is So I borrow an example from an evolutionary biology teacher who who asked the question, why do giraffes have such long necks? Right. Um, and he says, the teacher says that the common answer from like a kid, if you ask a kid, will be so they can reach the tall trees, the leaves on the tall trees. But the biological answer is because giraffes with longer necks survived and reproduced more. Right? Okay. This is a sort of teleological argument in a sense, insofar as, yes, the giraffe's neck is there, and tongue and all of its various biological features are there to facilitate it eating in a certain way, right? It is not there because it's not even there that it was designed to work well in that environment or whatever like that. It's more like these features in particular are for a function. They do something, right? So, I mean, another common example I use is that if I have a book of matches, right, the match head and the striker are in some way oriented towards each other, right? The white phosphorus in here and the red phosphorus in here. I know that if I do, right, really? I broke my match. Okay, you get the point. If I strike the match and I'm not incompetent, then it'll produce flame, right? These are oriented towards the production of flame, right? The design of the match and the striker is not just put together in a certain way. It's put together for a particular purpose, right? It's to do something. And that doing something is part of what informs the design, right? Because if it weren't for that, there would be no reason for the design to be the way that it is. That sort of thing. Anyway, I'm gonna go back a few seconds. See what else has he got here.
You do with your body doesn't matter.
The nature of a thing is the what it isness of a thing.
What he's doing is laying out the idea of teloi or teleology, which is this Catholic understanding that everything in the universe has an invisible blueprint in it, and this tells us exactly.
Okay, sorry, I know I stopped at exactly the same point as last time, but that's not what he said. What? Father Mike there was laying out essence, not telos, not end, right? The end of something is different from its essence. The end relies upon its essence, and its essence is in part determined by its end, but those are different things. So to sort of try and mush these together is jumping the gun, right? If you really wanted to get into Father Mike's arguments about teleology, you got to go forward a little bit in the talk, like I think like 10 minutes or so at least.
So they're connected, but they're not the same thing. That makes
yeah. All four of the Aristotle's four causes are closely related, right? You take my beautiful handcrafted and beautifully engraved Pints with Aquinas Stein, not sponsored, but you know, check out Pints with Aquinas. It's a great podcast. Catholic Joe Rogan, so to speak. This thing is designed in a certain way, of certain materials, for a certain purpose, by certain people, right? So it was manufactured. It was a nice, you know, handmade and then etched stein, made in a certain way. It was made in that way according to a certain design, right? That it has the logo on it, that it has these like ridges along the bottom to help with the release of carbonation. It has the wider base, right? It has this sort of the barrel shape common to a sort of Germanic beer stein, all that for a certain purpose, which is specifically for the consumption of cold beer, not for the consumption of coffee. You would design a coffee cup in a different way than this, right? It would not have those ridges along the bottom. The handle would pretty typically be a different shape, right? It wouldn't necessarily have this wide base, which would not really help with heat retention, things like that. Right? A coffee cup would typically have a different design to it. The design features that make this a good beer stein do nothing for helping it provide you with hot coffee. Right? This is also I have an article about this, funny enough. This specific example. But all of these components, right? What it's made of, why it's made, what it's made for, and how it's made, all are interconnected and you can't separate them. Right? If you separate them, what you have is a bad thing, a thing that's poorly made or poorly designed or whatever.
Isn't that the same sort of reasoning that sort of leads to the theological idea of predestination, or like Calvinism, where it's like these people were preordained to go to heaven and these aren't, and that's just the way it is?
Sort of.
It sounds like the same kind of thought to me, at least.
Sort of. On the one side, certainly, right? So part of our... Okay, so I'm going to have to get into a very brief critique of Calvinism here, but I'll try and keep it short. The idea of Jesus, don't put that pressure on me. The idea of God creating persons with their end being hell. And by that I don't just mean where they end up, but their purpose being damnation is incoherent nonsense. It's incoherent because the purpose of something fundamentally cannot be its own damnation or destruction. That's not how beings work, because the existence of something is the good of that thing. And if the good of that thing is the destruction of that thing, then that's a self-contradiction. God does not contradict himself. Right? That's the very short version of this. But the contrary is absolutely right. That our end, right, our ultimate end is eternal union with God in heaven. Now, whether we fulfill that or not is this is why we wind up connecting theology with ethics, right? Why we would say that to be a good person is in large part to obey God, right? To achieve this union with God, to accept Christ's salvation and all this, right? Because we are fulfilling that end, and by fulfilling that end, we are uniting everything about ourselves and organizing our whole personhood and our whole being towards this common end or common purpose, which is towards something that is both higher than ourselves and definitive of ourselves, defines who and what we are. Okay, what was my time? How'd I do?
That was pretty brief.
Excellent.
So.
Good. Okay, sorry. Let's keep going. Hopefully I've beaten this dead horse enough.
That everything in the universe has an invisible blueprint in it, and this tells us exactly what things can and can't be used for. Let's jump into how we can figure out God's hidden invisible rulebook and everything. I think.
Okay. Sorry, I know we've only gone 4 seconds, but he keeps repeating invisible. This is for 2 reasons. One, it's just wrong. The telos, or the end of something, is not. It's not invisible in the sense that it's not discernible from its visible features. It is, absolutely, right? You can look at the design of this thing, right? This Stein, and figure out what it is and what it's for. Right? If you have any idea of how steins work and how they're different from coffee cups, you can tell that this is a stein, not a coffee cup. If you're not utterly unfamiliar with the things and not, and if you're observant, right? Great. You can observe what the end of a particular organ is of the human body, right? You can observe that, genitals are for generation, to use the example that we're going to use, right? The other reason, though, he wants to use invisible is the same reason that Richard Dawkins uses it all the time, which is purely to be dismissive, right? But the same reason he refers to God as an invisible bearded man in the sky or whatever. Like, okay,
yeah. To kind of add a little bit more context to that point,
mm-hmm.
I think he's calling it invisible because he does not believe that God exists. So therefore, if there is no God, then this natural law he's imbuing into things is also invisible, because God is invisible in the sense of non-existing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you could be a little bit more charitable too, which is not being all that charitable, because he's just falling into the mistake that Hume made, right? Hume argued that Hume was basically a strict empiricist. That was a large part of where he went wrong, and held that the only things that we can know with not with certainty, any degree of reliability, let's say, are those things which are directly observable, right? And so things that we infer from the things that we observe, we cannot have any certainty of, right? Which is where he gets the problem of induction, which is where he gets his rejection of teleology, where he gets his rejection of essences, where he gets his rejection of the immaterial, right? Where Hume goes entirely wrong in every possible way. So to say that it's invisible in that sense, it might just be that sort of Humean wedge between the purely material, purely observable, and the that which must be inferred from the observed. Let me put it this way. If you see trees moving outside, you can infer that it's windy. For Hume, that's not necessarily the case. It might be windy, or the trees might be waving at you. You have to check.
Wow.
I'm not... He doesn't use that example specifically. He uses instead the example of the sun rising. He very directly uses the example that just because the sun has risen every day for all of your life and the lives of everyone you've ever known does not mean that it will rise tomorrow. That is no reason to think that the sun will rise tomorrow. Not even that you can't know with certainty. That is no reason to think that it will. That's retarded. I'm sorry. That's really, really, really stupid. This is why I can't take Hume seriously.
You know, I'm going through. I'm reading my way through a brief introduction of the history of Western thought, and when I get to Hume, Professor, I'm gonna have to have you A, fact check my understanding, and B, just rant with you at how bad Hume
Look,
is.
I
haven't gotten to Hume yet, but when I do, I will let you know.
Okay, so let me also be clear about this. I am no expert on David Hume. I have read a fair amount of the primary literature and a little bit of secondary literature, but that's it. I'm not like I haven't dedicated a lot to studying Hume. So I'm not the one to go to for knowing what it is that Hume had to say about a lot of these things. I know some of his specific arguments and examples, but I'm not necessarily there for a full picture of him. I am, however, well versed in why he's wrong, because everyone who ever had two brain cells to rub together before David Hume already proved him wrong. And I know a lot of those guys pretty well.
Okay, then.
Anyway, I'm sorry. I despise David Hume. He's like one of my least favorite human beings in history. He ruined a lot of the world. I think he ruined a lot of the world. Like he's
not just least favorite philosopher, but least favorite human being. That is a wide net.
Yes.
Professor.
Yep.
That humanity encompasses a lot of.
Okay, look. I say one of. I mean like bottom 100. Okay, not like top 3 or whatever. Like there's a lot of non-philosophers that populate that.
It's very charitable of you to have such a long list.
You're gonna have to make a video like doing like tiers of from bad
worst
to
people
to
ever.
worst.
It's mostly politicians. It's almost exclusively politicians until you get to David Hume, Judas Iscariot. There aren't a lot of non-politicians on the list of worst people in history.
There's no like neighbors or like old friends that wronged you or never returned.
Not worst people in history. Like people I don't like. Sure, I have plenty of people who I don't like. Like Gary down the street. I don't like him, but he's not one of the worst 100 people in history. There's no way. There's no way. I don't even know if Jeffrey Epstein is one of the worst 100 people in history. He's bad. Don't get me wrong. Very bad. But there have been a lot of bad people in history with far-reaching effects.
Speaking of bad people, this man is about to claim that Father Mike is a bad person.
No. That's predictable, though.
Yeah, he's about to claim Father Mike is a bad person for making this chair analogy. So let's.
Fucking hell. All right, let's go.
With chairs.
This chair is the nature of chair.
Okay.
What is a chair for? To sit upon. I am using the chair for the end which it was created.
What he's doing here is setting up this worldview that everything, both things created by humans and all natural things, were created by God for a purpose, and that everything out there has this invisible, undetectable, unverifiable, secret rulebook that if you cross, you go to hell. Can we empirically verify that things have teleology? No.
That's not true at all.
Go ahead. This presenter, Cade, this gay ex-trad.
The gay, right? Go on.
Yes, the gay. The main reason why he abandoned Catholicism in favor of atheism is because he felt that he could not testably verify any of the church's theological claims. He's an empiricist through and through.
Do I need to pull out Augustine again? Because
You might need to.
God damn it.
You-
No, it'll be the same passage. I don't need to read the same passage again. Has he met a child? Original sin is utterly verifiable the moment you encounter a small child. It's done. Simple. Empirically verifiable. If you don't believe in original sin, or at least fallenness, you
Professor,
spent way too
you-
much time around very nice adults.
Professor, you need to put that clip from the last stream into the description of this stream.
Okay.
Just for further context.
Okay. Augustine clip link.
Yes. Honestly,
All right.
what
Go ahead.
one of the finest bits of media I have ever been proud to be a part of, Professor. So
I swear, I did not mean to make that a joke.
it
I
was,
said that in 100% earnestness.
and that's honestly what made it so hilarious.
I know.
You were so earnest about it.
Anyway, all right. So the point I was making here is that violating the nature of something is not even necessarily a sin, let alone a mortal sin. Like, hold on. I have here a sticky note, right? Got it. Oh, I have a sticky note. It's on my head.
Yep.
Behold.
You have to guess what it says.
No, I'm now using it as an eye patch. Oops. I am thereby violating its nature. Let me put it under my glasses. The reason I'm violating the nature of the sticky note is because by placing it on my human slightly oily forehead, I am making it less adhesive, right? And by making it less adhesive, I'm using this for something which is causing it to be less capable of fulfilling its function, right? I'm using it strictly for my own purposes, which is, in essence, violating the nature of it being a sticky note. I have not sinned in doing so. I can also crumple it up and throw it in the trash, which is also absolutely violating its nature. Right? The difference, of course, being that things, whether those are natural objects or artifacts, do not have intrinsic value, whereas human beings do, right? And Father Mike makes that point very directly, very explicitly in this very talk. But guess who didn't listen to that part? Is that a good example? I mean, I can use Father Mike's too, but
I mean, the reason why he dismisses it, and I'm not trying to be uncharitable, I'm just quoting another video of his.
okay. Don't have that
Theology
context.
is theology is poetically sounding poppycock, according to this gentleman from another video. So
Okay. So is he like, I don't even know if you would know this term, but is he like a logical positivist or something? Like that, the idea that, so logical positivism is a stricter version of what's usually called scientism. Essentially the idea that which is not strictly empirical is empirically verifiable, I should say, is ultimately nonsense, is merely made up by human convention and therefore has no objective meaning.
yes, okay.
Yes. I don't listen to those people.
Yeah,
sorry.
In that sense of the term, as you've defined it just now, he is a logical positivist.
Okay. I see, that's the thing. I don't think he and I could have a productive conversation. I do think that
I tried, Professor, and it did not
okay,
go.
well, there you go. Yeah. I have yet to ever have a productive conversation with a dyed-in-the-wool logical positivist, or scientismist, or whatever. That sort of idea.
Yes, a card-carrying logical positivist.
Card-carrying, yeah. Well, I don't know. He might not carry the card because he might not know the term. It's a relatively obscure term. But it's descriptive.
He claims to have studied philosophy and theology and all these things. So
okay, well, fine. Well, look. Here's the thing: logical positivism completely fell out of favor when it was found to be absurd and silly in the mid 20th century. It was in vogue for only like 10, maybe 15 years, primarily in the sort of English speaking philosophical world. And then it was just it wasn't even disproven. It was just disregarded because it's so obviously stupid. And I'm not alone in that. Like, I'm not just being mean like I am to David Hume. I'm mean to David Hume. This is just the scholarly consensus about logical positivism. Like, no one takes it seriously, or has for the last 50 or so years. But what happened was it migrated its way down into popular culture and sort of sprang up as some of the roots of the sort of new atheism, which is why the new atheism got completely bodied the moment any of them talked to a philosopher. Because it's not philosophically serious. Yeah, I don't know. There are philosophically serious atheists. They are not this sort, or the sort that you're representing him as. Let's say.
Well,
I'm not. By the way, that is not an assumption that you're being uncharitable. I mean, just because I can't speak from my own experience. So, because we can only say with certainty what we can empirically verify. After all, so I haven't watched his other videos, so I don't know. Sorry, I had to go there.
See, I've saved you the headache of watching the other videos, and I've been able to distill a lot of extra context into this discussion.
Yeah, we've already been going an hour. We're 2.5 minutes in. This has got to be the longest original video to response ratio I've gotten yet. Good lord.
Well, let's keep going, Professor.
Indeed, this will be fun.
Detectable, unverifiable, secret rulebook that if you cross, you go to hell. Can we empirically verify that things have teleoi? No. Do we have a method to reliably test what teleology tells us? No.
This is to sit upon, this is to set things upon. But watch this. Wait for it. Oh! So question, did I just violate the nature of a chair? I didn't violate the nature, I just used it for my own purposes.
No, you just put a cup on a chair and you're making it overly complicated.
What is this?
No, hold on. So
he made it overly complicated, Professor.
Maybe he made it overly dramatic. Thought that was the point he was going to try and make there. Because, Father Mike overreacts and then he overreacts more, and maybe he's being overdramatic about it, which, all right, fair. I'll give you that. That's fine. He's overemphasizing to make a minor point into a big one, because it's important. Okay, cool. Rhetorical flourish. But no, that's not what I was going for here. How do I approach this? Okay, I have to dive pretty deep into the weeds, for which I apologize sincerely in advance.
I'll try and keep my head above water.
Yeah, Giovanni says, never seen your content before. It's Catholic Philosophy Channel. Yes, sir. Yeah, so I talk about philosophical topics primarily from a Catholic perspective, but also just broadly from an educational perspective. This is more editorial than strictly informative. Streams like this are. I also do video game live streams where I play video games and talk about the philosophical topics there. So that's another fun thing I do. Also, I've recently started a series on talking about some interesting philosophical contents in the Star Wars Expanded Universe. So there's that. Anyway, stick around if you like some of what you see. In any case, I now have to talk about why Thomas Aquinas didn't believe in chairs. So buckle the hell up into your chair that I promise exists. And I think Aquinas was a little bit wrong. So, okay. What I mean here is that there is a distinction to be made, which, by the way, the gay started alluding to this distinction between artifacts, that is, things which are man-made, and natural beings, things that exist in nature. There is a crucial difference, say, between a rock and a stool, right? Or a chair. Let's just go with chair. Let's go with the chair. To keep things consistent. So if a chair, according to Thomas Aquinas, does not exist, it does not have its own intrinsic essence. Its essence and its teleology, insofar as they exist only by analogy, are extrinsic. They are impressed upon the configuration of matter by the finite person that makes the thing. Makes, not creates, for Aquinas. Okay, so a chair is not an essence. There is no essence to a chair. There is no intrinsic teleology to a chair. There is extrinsic teleology, and there is an extrinsic essence to both, right? To a chair, right? Both of those. They're extrinsic because they are projected onto the thing by the human mind, right? You with me so far?
Yep.
Okay.
I just had a light bulb moment, but I'll wait until we get further on. into the
Okay,
video.
cool. All right, fair enough. Natural things, however, have intrinsic teleology and intrinsic essences. Right? This is easiest to see in natural organisms, like living things, but it applies to inanimate matter as well. Right? Rocks. Rocks have intrinsic essence in that they are a particular kind of rock with a specific kind of crystalline structure and chemical makeup and that sort of thing. If they were different, they would be different. Right? That has nothing to do with what we make of them. Marble is marble, regardless of whether we shape it into a wall, a statue, or nothing in particular. It also has particular ends, right? Teleological ends. It has certain, in other words, physical characteristics. It tends towards certain kinds of interactions with other matter, right? Rock, stone, typically will react to acid because of their each of their chemical properties, right? It'll fall because of its mass, right? These are ends of inanimate natural things. This is very different from artifacts, things that we make, because we impose ends onto artifacts when we make them. Okay. When the gay extrad says that there is no intrinsic teleology or there is no end or purpose to a chair, he could mean two things. He could mean what Aquinas means. However, he does not. What he means is something substantially stupider. I'm being mean here because this is a dumb idea. He means that a chair exists as an undifferentiated lump of matter that we can choose to interact with in any way whatsoever. And no one way would be better than any other way. Try living like that for 30 seconds, and you'll die. Should I eat this?
I wouldn't if I were you.
Why not? It's just a thing. It has no particular end to it. I might as well take a nice bite out of it.
There is no nutritional value to that substance.
There is an obvious answer to this. It's that I'll die. I will be killed by the consumption of shards of ceramic, right? And I don't want to die. I shouldn't want to die. It's not good for me, and so I shouldn't do it. This thing has some ends, some things that it will do properly because they're made to do them, and not other things, right? This is so painfully obvious that you have to very deliberately avoid these ideas in order to say that you disbelieve them.
Which I believe our presenter does very well, to his credit.
Yeah, right, yeah. I mean, sure, I mean, I used the example in another natural law lecture I did recently about ink. This is ink for my fountain pen, right? This is not good for drinking, right? If I drank this, I shouldn't drink this. I think we can say that just simply enough, right? I, as a human being, should not drink this. The ends of this do not align with the ends of my digestive system. There you go. And I think that's really all you need to say in terms of the natural law with respect to how we ought to interact with things, right? And especially artifacts, right? Artifacts very obviously have an intended purpose. Ask the person who made them. Right? If someone makes a chair, they're not going to say, if you ask them what is this thing for, they're not going to say, I don't know, whatever you want. No, they're going to explain how to use it. Right? When you buy something from IKEA, it's not like you're buying an undifferentiated Lego set. You're buying a chair. It's just unassembled. It's got instructions to it. If you assemble it wrong, it's not going to work right. And you know it's not going to work right because you know it's going to work wrong because you know what it working right would be like, because we can observe these things. We actually can observe whether something is functioning correctly, what something is for. Now, it requires inference. It's not something you can observe in the same way that you can observe, I don't know, the length of the pen that I was talking about, or the volume of beer in my getting empty stein. We're not going to make it through 20 minutes, are we? Or 12 minutes? Anyway, okay.
I guess sort of on a similar point, Professor, like you probably noticed, but I've been using tissues because I'm a little sick. But I know what my body is supposed to feel like naturally, like when I'm in homeostasis and I'm not there, so that I know that I'm not feeling the way I'm supposed to, intend to feel.
Yeah, this is why biomedical ethics is in shambles, sort of as a discipline. Because with the rejection of teleology, we have sort of jettisoned any real notion of health. Right? If you can't... Go ahead.
Sorry, is this why sex reassignment surgery is justified? They're saying, well, your genitals aren't really how you think they should be, so let's turn them into something else that you would like them to be rather than what they were intended to be.
Yeah, right. So we can look at this. We can look at this two ways, right? If we assume that the ends of something are merely determined subjectively, right? It's what something is for is determined by how I want to use it, like what I want to use it for, and how I want to use my genitals is purely for a bizarre and disordered simulacrum of sexual pleasure of the opposite sex, and that's how I want to use them. Then fixing it would mean aligning that to how I want them to be used, how I want them to work. Whereas if we have a proper understanding of how the human body works, then we know what health means. Health means the body's functioning properly. And if something is going wrong, we know that in order to fix it, what we need to do is make it function properly. The problem with a lot of both philosophy of medicine and biomedical ethics is that by jettisoning this sort of teleological idea that there is a way that the body ought to be working, which you'll find in things like disability theory, right? That right, this idea that one's disability is part of one's essence, that sort of thing. You'll find in gender theory, right, that the function of our sex organs is determined by our subjective desires. You'll even find it in like hard medicine as well, where we don't necessarily have this idea of whether something is functioning properly. We only have an idea of whether something is causing some kind of clinical discomfort, which you also, by the way, find in clinical psychology. Clinical psychology has this exact same problem. There's no notion of how the mind should be working and should be organized. It's, is this causing you distress? And if so, what can we do about that, right? It's not, is this functioning incorrectly? Can we fix it? Right. So, yeah, it's a very fundamental sort of worldview difference that has incredibly far-reaching implications.
Not to harp too much on a minor point you made, Professor.
Go for it.
But did you say that a disability is not a part of someone's essence?
Yes.
Because having a disability myself and knowing some people who also have disabilities, they claim that they don't actually want to be cured or undergo therapy because if they lost that disability, they would lose a sense of who they are as a person.
That is
got to be something psychological, like where you kind of link your essence to your being.
Yeah,
and
so
that your being should always be what you perceive to be its natural state, but
right, and they would say, well, look, Father Mike said that our essence, like our body and our essence, are connected. So clearly, if I get rid of my disability, then something's changed about my essence, and I think that's the claim that they would make in response.
Yeah. So one of two things is going on there. One of three things is going on there. Two are philosophical, one is psychological, and I want to go through the psychological one first because I think it's the more charitable response, and because I also think it's probably what's going on through a lot of sort of disability rights advocates' heads when they put forward ideas like this. Taking claim to something, even if it's negative, can be a very strong psychological coping mechanism. That has a negative connotation, but I don't mean it negatively. it can be a way of dealing with something that is otherwise difficult to deal with by sort of internalizing it and by making it one's own. And so by kind of identifying oneself with this disability or the struggle or whatever, that can just be a way of dealing with the difficulties that come from it. And that is completely understandable, even if it might have some negative repercussions in terms of like treatment options, whatever.
Right. And that's why, speaking from personal experience,
Hmm.
I always say I have a disability instead of using the phrase I am disabled, because that says more about something that's a part of me rather than intrinsically connected to my essence.
Right. And
I
that's
think
been medical practice for a long time, right? It's just now kind of shifting.
I believe so, but the new disability rights activists are like, yes, we need to claim ownership of the term disabled, and I'm like, no, we just have these things. We are not these things. We are much more than our medical issues.
Right, exactly. And now the other things that could be going on are two philosophical errors. One being kind of what we've just been talking about, this idea that the essence of somebody is completely determinative of personal subjective choice, right? That I choose to identify with this because I can't do it, I can't do otherwise. And so because I've chosen to identify with it, then I've taken it on as something as deeply a part of myself. Right. The other thing that might be going on is a lack of understanding of the convertibility of the transcendentals, my other philosophical hobby horse. The idea that something is defined not by what the essence of something is defined by its perfective or by its perfections, right? By its perfect state. And deficiencies from that perfection can only ever be accidental. Right? And this is because being, the existence of something, and goodness, the goodness of that thing, are they perfectly coincide when something exists fully and is perfectly good. Right? And so deficiencies of something cannot be essential to it. Because for something to be essential is to say that it is a good thing for that thing to have it, whatever that property is.
Oh,
And Professor, if I may, I remember going off of what Grammar Police was saying. I think in the chat I don't know if it was the other day or maybe today, we talked about like in the resurrection, if we had a disability, are we going to be resurrected with that disability?
yeah.
And I think you said no. I don't know if you remember that conversation.
Aquinas certainly says no. I lean towards no as well. That
I
said,
certainly hope not, for my own sake.
Well, there you go. I for your sake, I hope not too. In that case, that said, where I may depart from a lot of, especially modern Thomists, I am not entirely convinced that we won't have tattoos and non-mutilative body modifications. Let's say that we did in life.
I don't think Aquinas would consider a tattoo like a defect, like you were talking.
Right.
Father Mike Schmitz have his tattoo. Have you seen it?
Yeah. It's the Jerusalem cross, right?
Was it or so he's not gonna have that?
I think he probably will. Probably, though I'm not hard set on that. I would not be surprised either way, but I would probably lean towards yes.
Well, we'll find out one day.
Yeah, well, right. Yeah. All right. Yeah, anyway, let's keep going. Let's see.
Yeah.
I took a table and I propped up my car on the table to change the oil, but I pretty quickly violate the nature of table. Yeah.
No, what does it mean to even violate the nature of a table? It's an incoherent sentence.
I can use
He just explained it.
That's another thing. He claims that violating the nature of a thing is a, quote, incoherent statement.
Okay, where's your argument? Like, he doesn't present an argument for this.
Nope. No.
Like,
he just dismisses it.
Right.
So
now there are arguments against this idea. Like Aquinas gives one. Like I just said, there are even arguments against intrinsic teleology in general. I don't think they're all that good, but there are arguments. He just does not present an argument here. He just says that's incoherent. Okay, show me the logical contradiction. That's what you have to show if you're going to claim incoherence. Like I did. Remember when we were talking about Hume? I showed direct logical contradictions in several points. because that's what you need to do to show that something is incoherent. Like, here's an example. Here's an example. A common incoherent nonsense phrase is banana octopus, right? Referring to something as a banana octopus, right? How you show that that is contradictory is to see that the two things, banana and octopus, essentially involve two contrary characteristics. One being a fruit, that is a part of a plant, the other being an animal. They're completely different things. Something cannot be both of those. For something to be both of those, would be for it to be A and not A simultaneously. And so the banana octopus cannot exist despite animations of a banana-shaped octopus or a octopus-shaped banana or whatever. Right? That's how you demonstrate an incoherency. Not just say, well, that doesn't make sense. Okay.
So is the exception to that the Eucharist that has, it's of one substance, but the form or the appearance is of bread and wine, but the substance is Christ himself.
The form is Christ itself. The accidents are bread and wine. This is why, by the way, this is why Catholics are better than Orthodox. That's not nice. This is because Eastern Catholics are annoying about this too. This is why I prefer the Western approach to theology. Because when we encounter something that seems contradictory like that, we desperately want to figure out how it isn't contradictory and how it can possibly make sense. Whereas the Eastern sensibility is to say, I guess it doesn't make sense, but I believe it anyway, right? Which I don't like that. There is something respectable about that in not trying to reach beyond your capacity, right? Not trying to understand things that only God can comprehend or something, that sort of thing. Fine. But when your Western brothers are over here saying, here's how it could work, here's a perfectly coherent philosophical explanation, and then you're still over there in the East saying, I guess it's a mystery, no one can ever come up with a coherent solution to this problem, while someone else is over there coming up with a coherent solution to the problem, that's when it gets annoying to me. Anyway, I'm sorry, that was a bit of a tangent. But
in the East, they would say that, the Trinity, it exists, we believe it, but let's not try to understand it. We're in the West. You would constantly try to understand how
whereas
it
in the
works
West,
or
you
why.
have St. Anselm giving a very coherent, but maybe overly elaborate and maybe even overly presumptive argument for how the persons of the Trinity interact, and why they interact in the way that they do, and why God is incarnate, and all this stuff. Yeah, that is kind of to say that the West, our Western mode of theology has its faults too. There's a serious potential for hubris there, but I still prefer it. I think that its faults are less serious and easier to avoid. Let's put it that way.
Yes. Well, let's see what more.
Use it according to purposes that actually end up ultimately violating the very reason that it exists. Does that make sense?
No, that doesn't make sense, at all. What he's saying is that you can only use things for which they were created, otherwise you're violating the magical essence that is a screwdriver.
That's literally the opposite of what he said.
You're not violating the essence, you're violating the...
I want to rewind, actually. I want to go back to what Father Mike said. With the putting the cup on the table, or putting the cup on the chair. Because that's when Mike said exactly the opposite of what Gay X Trad said. Let's go back to this, and then we'll jump forward to, where are we at? We're about 1305. Or 305. Okay, let's see.
This is a sit upon, this is a set things upon, but watch this. Wait for it. Oh! So question, did I just violate the nature of a chair? I didn't violate the nature, I just used it for my own purposes.
No, you just put a cup on a chair and you're making it overly complicated.
What is this? I took a table, and I propped up my car on the table to change the oil. Would I pretty quickly violate the nature of table? Yeah.
No, what does it mean to even violate the nature of a table? It's an incoherent sentence.
I can use it according to purposes that actually end up ultimately violating the very reason that it exists. Does that make sense?
No, that doesn't make sense, at all. What he's saying is that you can only use things for which they were created, otherwise you're violating the magical essence that is a screwdriver. The average person understands we can make these...
Okay, did we see the contradiction here, right? So, on the one hand, he just directly cited Father Mike drawing the distinction between unintended use and abuse of a thing, let's say. right? Using something in a way that is other than its primary
Okay.
nature versus using something in a way that is contrary to or destructive of its nature. And then he immediately says that if you use anything for any purpose other than its intrinsic end or its intended purpose, then it's wrong and it'll send you to hell, which is completely the opposite of the point that Father Mike was trying to say. Father Mike was trying to set up this trichotomy, right? On the one hand, you have using something for its intended purpose. On the far extreme, you have using something in a way that is destructive of that purpose. But in the middle, you have using something in a non-destructive but productive way that is not in alignment with its intended purpose, right? These are completely separate. One is
Right.
morally.
So,
Go ahead.
yeah, just to make sure I'm understanding it, Professor, unintended use is
Mhm.
not the same thing as abuse.
Right.
Okay.
Professor,
For example,
this kind of reminds me.
to take
I
this one
think
really
this is
quick.
what.
To take this
Oh.
example, my beer stein really quick, right? If I put soda in here, there'd be nothing wrong with doing that, right? It would in no way violate its end. It would not make it in any way worse as a beer stein. It would still work just fine. But if I were to use this for coffee, that might have detriments, right? Because coffee, if you know your coffee cups and especially your ceramic coffee cups, and this is not particularly well sealed, I'll say, coffee by design, if for a well-designed coffee cup, the cup will absorb some of the oils of the coffee and lend that flavor to further coffee, which is why a lot of people don't wash coffee cups. By a lot of people, I mean me, right? You don't wash ceramic coffee cups if you can avoid it, right? You can rinse them out and stuff to get debris out and that sort of thing, but you don't like scrub and wash the inside because
Never understood.
it ruins the seasoning, like it's a cast iron skillet or whatever, right? Coffee would, to a minor degree, be contrary to the nature of this beer stein. Using it as a hammer would be all the more so, because it would break and it would no longer be usable for its intended purpose or its pseudo-intrinsic end. Now, I say pseudo-intrinsic, I'm gonna go a little bit further than I did before. Oh god, my wife is in the chat threatening to wash my coffee cups. And don't do it, please. Please don't. Now, to be fair, I have to sometimes if I have any kind of like anything cream based in my coffee, I do actually wash them because otherwise that's gross. Curdles. But I usually drink black coffee, so I don't usually need to. Anyway, where's I going with this?
Coffee cups.
Coffee cup,
Yeah, maybe.
putting soda in there.
Think soda in it. Nah, I lost it. Go on. You were going to say something before I got into that. Oh, I know. Never mind. I know what I was going to say. Go ahead, but I go ahead. I'll come back to it.
So I was going to say earlier that the logic that he's using, really, I kind of see where liberals get the logic of like, well, we shouldn't have guns because the only purpose of a gun is to kill people. Whereas conservatives would say, well, it's for sporting purposes, for self-defense, it's not intended just to go out and mass murder a whole bunch of people.
I have another great video about this, about that example in particular, about Kyle Rittenhouse. So you remember the Kyle Rittenhouse case of self-defense, right?
Yeah.
There was one really particularly interesting exchange that happened on the stand where the Weasley-looking lawyer, the prosecutor, was cross-examining him, and he went through a series of questions like, you know that an AR-15 is a deadly weapon, and that shooting someone is capable of killing them, and that if you fire an AR-15 at somebody at close range, it will likely result in their death. And so you were intending to kill them, correct? And he says, no, I was intending to end the threat. And you could just see the guy just then just goes to a completely new line of questioning because the more traditional mind, the more traditionally oriented mind is capable of making this distinction, right? That the AR-15, the gun in this case, the purpose of it was for self-defense, was for ending the encroaching threat. It was not for killing someone. There's a big, very important difference, especially in a self-defense case.
I think there's also like a line of reasoning because I follow a little bit of some of these trials that have to do with firearms, and I watch some of this. And I remember there was one case where they talked about someone. I think they shot law enforcement, not knowing that they were law enforcement, but the ammo that they used, they were saying that the ammo was a cop killer, and it had been known to, like, did you know this ammo was a cop killer? I don't know if you've heard of this before. They say, well, like any ammo is a cop
I've heard
killer.
ammo
because-
called cop killer ammo because what that means is full or partial copper jacket. That's all that means. Because it has very minor armor piercing capability. That's all that means. Like, yeah, that's what that's referring to, and that's very silly, right? It is clearly not designed to kill cops. It's designed to penetrate. That's what it's designed for. And the fact that it can penetrate, certain kinds of body armor, great. It can kill cops, but so can any other round if you hit them somewhere they're not armored and somewhere vital, right?
I think there's a hidden logic in that, if I may, not to get too deep into the weeds, is that there's the notion that the government,
I'm fine with it.
There's the idea that the government should not be that the armament that the government has should not be weaker than what civilians have. That the civilians should be at some disadvantage to the state. That the state should always be able to suppress the populace. And I think that's sort of where that reasoning. It's like kind of a hidden secret, like all that. Because I always hear the logic that, oh, well, these weapons only belong in the hands of law enforcement or the military. And it's like, well, militaries don't have a good track record for not always protecting your rights.
You could say that again. When was the last time that a private individual used nuclear weapons against the civilian population? I forget. Is that a thing? Or no, wait, no, it was only a government that ever did that. That's right. I forgot. Anyway, twice. I was saying this in, not to make fun of you in particular, MSimp, but to make fun of your username in particular. I do often use this line of reasoning specifically against I don't know, imperial sympathizers, so to speak. That when your government creates a weapon of mass destruction and uses it to murder massive civilian populations twice, they're probably the bad guys. Now, here's the funny thing: am I talking about Emperor Palpatine, or am I talking about FDR, Dwight Eisenhower? Either way. Anyway. Point being. Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right, and I do think that is, like, as an aside, that that desire on the part of even ordinary citizens of having an armament or a power disparity between state and citizenry is incredibly dangerous, and that is absolutely contrary to the intentions of the American founders, certainly, because that was not the case at the time at all.
There's always the argument that, oh, well, they had muskets back then. There was no way they could have known about fully automatic weapons in our time. But I think if they knew, they still would have gone with it, because they're like, well, I forget where it says exactly that the people have the right to abolish government and establish new government, and sort of that train of logic would make
the preamble of the Constitution.
Yes, there you go. Thank you.
Has that in it. I know there's also something really similar in the Declaration of Independence as well. I think it's probably clearer in the Declaration, if I remember right. It's not my period of history, to be fair. So don't throw this at me. Okay, Baze has a question. Says, what about things that can be subsumed into higher goods that are contrary to their nature? I.e., beating off an attacker with a laptop you're holding. That would absolutely violate the nature of the laptop. It's just that the laptop does not have intrinsic value. That there would be a significant difference between doing that and say you're being attacked by a bear and just, taking your friend you're out hiking with and throwing them at the bear so you can get away, right? Yes, it would work, but it wouldn't be right, because you're violating the intrinsic dignity of the other person, right? And that's a difference. If you're using your laptop in a way that's destructive of the nature of the laptop, okay, great. That's not ideal because you value your laptop, but you necessarily value yourself more, and you should. Right? So yeah, I think that you absolutely can do that sort of thing that violates the nature of something, and that's not always wrong. That's all. It's not always wrong to do that if it's a thing that has no intrinsic value. Now that said, here's my Here was my hot take that I skipped over a little bit. I think Aquinas was wrong about artifacts. I do think that chairs and pens and beer steins and sticky notes do exist. I think they have essences, and I think they have intrinsic teleology. It's just that intrinsic teleology and those essences are created, not made. Created, not made, invoking the creed deliberately, and imparted to them by their finite human creators. And I think that is part of the image and likeness of God, our capability of creating new things like that, in the same way that God does, just on a finite scale. Anyway, that's controversial, but it's the idea comes from Scotus, from Duns Scotus, who was a Franciscan critic of Aquinas, and wrote very shortly afterwards, pointed out a lot of potential errors in Aquinas. I think that's one he got right. The other one, notably, he got right was the Immaculate Conception. Scotus was one of the first major serious defenders of the doctrine of the Immaculate Conception before it was dogmatized. And he got that right, where Aquinas got it a little bit off. Anyway.
Well, speaking of getting things off, this
keep
next
going.
bit's
Let's keep going. Descriptive, scientific claims about things like if you drop a car on certain tables, they will break. People sit on tables. Those claims we can actually investigate. But if you somehow prop your car up on a table, this guy somehow thinks that it is a sin, or at the very least thinks that you're violating the nature of a table and God's gonna get mad or something like that.
He doesn't think that, but we already talked about this.
No.
Again, this is just being disingenuous. Father Mike's using an analogy. This guy doesn't seem to understand analogies. I think we can move on.
Let's talk about sex.
Let's not, especially with you. But pray tell, good sir, what do chairs have anything to do with homosexuality?
Like, what is sex for? Just scientifically, just observing, what is it for? What's the purpose? The two what it is fornesses of sex is procreation and union, or another way to say it is babies and bonding.
What? No. Here's the hidden massive jump in his logic. Yes, biologists can make descriptive claims about biology. Sometimes some forms of intercourse lead to fertilization. People engaging in consensual contact report feeling closer to each other.
Okay, some forms of intercourse.
Yeah, I was gonna highly suggest you let him finish before you.
Okay. You know what? Yeah, fine. I'll let him finish.
Because he's got a lot more to pile on to you, Professor. So
good lord, I kind of want to take this bit by bit because there's going to be a lot. But all right, I'll defer to your judgment here.
Here's the hidden massive jump in his logic. Yes, biologists can make descriptive claims about biology. Sometimes some forms of intercourse lead to fertilization. People engaging in consensual contact report feeling closer to each other. But here's the big issue. He jumps from making descriptive claims to prescriptive moral absolutes that if you disobey, you will go to hell. We can say that certain types of sex sometimes lead to babies, but what he's about to reverse engineer is that then if you ever don't do that, it becomes sinful.
Let's talk about eating.
We good?
Okay. Yep.
Okay.
Now we're good. Yeah,
okay.
So he basically claimed that just because some types of sex produce babies, and not all types of sex produce babies, we cannot mandate that sex has to be for producing babies.
Okay. So, what does he mean by some kinds of intercourse? Some forms of intercourse?
Referring to heterosexual intercourse.
We don't need to be more explicit, but we could. Okay. Why am I asking the question though? Anybody? Any guesses?
I think he's trying to say, or if I could not necessarily answer your question, but he's trying to say that like homosexual sex and heterosexual sex are on the same level, like it's just another form of sex rather than. I think it's his logic in that sense.
They're two kinds of the same thing. Yeah, they're two members of the same species, moral species. Let's say, because again, morality has to do with action. So
like that. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Professor.
Go for it.
He's sort of making it equal in the sense of like, well, it's like you like vanilla ice cream, but I like chocolate ice cream, so it's just another flavor. So he wants you to kind of lead you into his thinking that way.
As I've argued before, one can still be better objectively than the other, even with respect to like flavors. I got a whole thing on this another time. Let me draw an analogy here. I know he doesn't like these and is really bad at analogies, but let's see what we can do.
Hopefully we'll pick it up, Professor. So
okay. Some forms of hearts pump blood through the circulatory system. but only some do. That is no indication that that's what hearts are for, right? Like there's nothing to say that if a heart doesn't pump blood through your circulatory system, that it's somehow failing to be a heart or is going to damn you to I don't know, let's say separation from the body in terms of death, right? No, that's silly. It would be very silly to say that, right? Because we can't know what a heart is for just because some forms of hearts pump blood.
I certainly thought that it was not just to pump blood, but was a sacrifice for the gods.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. All right. This one in particular. This one in particular is for keeping the sun up in the sky from the top of this temple. Okay.
I mean, yes.
Well, but that's the thing is that
To
with this line of reasoning, if this isn't a reductio ad absurdum, I don't know quite what is. That this line of reasoning can in fact lead to, well, some hearts are for sacrificing to keep the sun going, right? Look, okay. Why I'm bringing this up? Why this is important? When we say some forms of sex or some forms of intercourse, the implication is that there are multiple different kinds of things that can be called intercourse, sexual intercourse specifically, and that that there is no discerning between them in terms of proper use of a bodily system, say, right? But that's the only bodily system that we treat like that. Literally. Like, there's no other bodily system where we refuse utterly to distinguish between functioning and non-functioning, or proper use and malfunction, let's say. Like, to get more, trying not to get too explicit, because it's an educational channel, and I want to get too crazy here, but those, let's say, other forms of intercourse, so to speak, those are not forms of intercourse. Those are just things that you might choose to do with your genitalia. To be as, dry about this as we can. That's radically different from like forms of intercourse. In the same way that, yeah, you might tear someone's heart out and hope that it keeps the sun rising tomorrow. That's not a different kind of circulatory system, right? The idea that teleology is just in no way observable is question begging at the very best, because it already assumes that intercourse, or that is to say, the use of our reproductive systems, has no teleology to it. It already assumes this. And by assuming that, in order to prove it, it's also assuming that that whatever use we put any part of our body to is entirely neutral with respect to the kind of thing that it is. That's...
Can I play devil's advocate a little?
Yeah,
here,
go
Professor?
for it, absolutely.
So, I think the gay ex-trad might respond to you and say, well, you can't say that other forms of intercourse are not intercourse, because I have already predetermined the definition of intercourse, and those other things fall under my definition of intercourse.
Okay, why do you define intercourse in that way, in that broad way, that particularly in a broad way that I don't think you'd be comfortable defining other functions of bodily systems?
Because it provides, not to be too explicit here, but it provides genital stimulation.
Okay.
Genital pleasure.
Right. That's motivated reasoning, though, right? The point, though, is that that's very clearly motivated reasoning, rather than any kind of analysis of the system itself. Right? You can even examine, like evolutionarily, like in terms of science, you can examine the end of sexual pleasure to get you to do it. Right? It's...
Right.
Which, I mean, to be fair, an evolutionary biologist, it does not, strictly speaking, in terms of biology, a sort of ateleological biology, does not have access to that kind of reasoning, but they illicitly imply it all day long, right? That is or employ, not imply. They employ that kind of reasoning all day long because it's obvious, right? That's sort of the whole point. Now we can also, beyond this, we can point to, if we already get the conclusion that bonding, that is spousal union, is the other end of sex, then we also have that as a separate end for sexual pleasure as well, right? That is it is, at least ideally, a mutually gratifying experience. Again, keeping things as dry as we can. And so that is a shared experience, a uniquely shared experience, such that it can and should bring the spouses together in a psychological as well as a social sense. What was the other thing he said? There was something. I want to go back through this little section, and because there was something else in here that I wanted to address briefly. Back to there.
Biologists can make descriptive claims about biology. Sometimes some forms of intercourse lead to fertilization. People engaging in consensual contact report feeling closer to each other. But here's the big issue. He jumps from making descriptive claims to prescriptive moral absolutes that if you disobey, you will go to hell. We can say that certain types of sex sometimes lead to babies, but what he's about to reverse engineer is that then if you ever don't do that, it becomes sinful.
Let's talk about...
Okay, what I was going to get at here is... he's again conflating... He's conflating the outcome with the intention. Not the intention even, with the end. Right? And this is the same thing that I brought up with respect to the running over somebody's bike example, right? The outcome is radically different from the end. You can have let's say, openness to life or even, hell, you can have the other. This is another thing that he's going to, I assume, just completely ignore, is this idea that if there are two ends, and if there are two characteristic ends to something, that pursuing one while not pursuing the other but not avoiding the other, or not specifically undermining the other, is a perfectly licit use of the thing. It's perfectly in line with the nature of the thing. Right? So, in other words, having sex for spousal union or bonding is perfectly fine, even if you have no intention of reproducing. Right?
Yeah,
and vice versa, by the way. But vice versa is true as well. Like if a couple are trying for a kid, but man, they really don't feel like it tonight, and it's not really going to be like romantic or whatever. But all right, I'm ovulating, so let's do. That's fine too, right? There's nothing wrong with either of those because both are pursuing one end but not undermining the other. Right? They're not violating the other end. And I'm sure that he's not talking about that because he's already sort of sweeping that under the rug here.
Yep. Yep.
All right. Anything else on this? Because I feel like that was kind of a key, but that was you said a lot there.
It sort of reminds me of the same, if I may, Professor.
Yeah,
there's also, I don't know if you can explain this a little bit, but sort of explain why is it that, for example, there's the logic that, well, I'm going to use contraception because I don't like abortion, so by using contraception, I avoid that. So can you explain why that thought process is, immoral? If you can, I don't know if you.
Yeah. I'll try and find the lecture I have on this. It's not this topic in particular, but it outlines the conceptual ground that you need in order to understand the topic. So it's a difference between what the scholastics called not willing something versus willing against something, or the difference between the Latin terms non velle, not to will, and either nolle or volere contra, that is to will something not or to will against something. I can simply not will something. I can simply not choose something, but not choose specifically to reject or stop it. Right? Take a Discord example. Right? I can choose to I can choose not to be heard by just sort of being quiet and not making much noise and not saying anything, or but everybody else gets the idea, right? I can mute. I can actively mute myself. I can act against my capacity for communication, for being heard, or I can just not be heard. Right? I can act in a way that is going to that is probably not going to have me be heard by anybody, or I can actively go out of my way to make sure that I'm not heard. Those are radically different actions because they're radically different attitudes towards the end that I would or would not be pursuing. So, with respect to contraception, this is what differentiates contraception from natural family planning or from just not having sex, particularly during fertile periods or just in general, right? One is specifically acting to undermine the procreative end of sex. The other is simply not pursuing that end. And choosing not to pursue that end, there's nothing wrong with that. Whereas choosing to act contrary to that end, particularly while still doing the behavior that has it as its natural end, right? That's either wrong because it's violating the nature of marriage, right, which involves procreation and having children, or it is violating the nature of the particular sex act by rendering it sterile, by acting against the end that the thing is for, or at least an end that the thing is for.
Yeah. Gay Extrad also has a video, quote unquote, debunking the Catholic view of contraception, and it's equally assertive.
Given that we're 2 hours deep and we're 4.5 minutes in, I don't think we're gonna have time for that one tonight.
No,
let's keep going.
No, that'll have to be a sequel stream.
We're gonna do this again. Oh God! All right, maybe we'll see.
Eating. This human act is for nourishment and for the pleasure you get from eating.
Can certain organisms digest certain foods? Yes. Do some people say they like certain foods? Yes, I'm all with you. But where is this going?
This is the next part. It's a little sensitive. Very sensitive, actually.
Read us trigger warning on planet Earth. We're about to talk about eating disorders.
Say someone who eats something for pleasure but doesn't want the nourishment, and so they make themselves throw it back up. Is that person violating the nature of eating? Yeah. You know that this hurts you. You know that this is one of those things where you're like, I feel so ashamed.
What do eating disorders have to do with being gay? First, eating disorders.
Should I answer or?
Nope. There's literally no point in answering, Professor. Keep going.
Because I will say, Father Mike explicitly answers the question. Link in the description. Come on, man. He's being disingenuous again.
I don't think he would understand the distinction between I have same-sex attractions and I'm acting on the same-sex attractions, because one of those is sinful, the other is not.
Okay, so just looking at what the next section is called, his brother came out as gay. I'm going to assume that he does try to address that, and I'm going to guess further that he fails. So I'm sure we'll get there. Because I remember that part of Father Mike's talk, and it was great. It was impactful. It was beautiful, and he's going to shit all over it. I'm just waiting for it.
Yep.
Aren't sinful. Second, eating disorders don't violate invisible blueprints. When you break them, God punishes you. This is nonsense.
And if that's the case when it comes to food, how much even more so is that the case when it comes to sex?
Not at all. Not in the slightest. Talk to a psychologist about eating disorders. Nobody will tell you that the harm is that it offends God, so he sends down shame as punishment. Eating disorders can...
Okay, to be fair, nobody says that. I mean, no ethicist will say that about sodomy either. So there's that. I mean, moral theologians might. By the way, moral theologians will also say that about gluttony. So moving on.
Having seen a wider catalog of this young man, he often confuses natural law ethics with divine command theory.
Of course he does. So do a lot of people. I mean, that's a common error. But what are you gonna do? I mean, I based on what you said and based on what he said to you, I would have thought he'd know that difference, but I don't know. Maybe he doesn't want to know that difference. I mean, look, I really hate being this uncharitable. I really do. Like this does kind of get to me. This kind of bothers me. Because
and that's why I had you react to it.
Yeah, like I don't want to assume the worst of this guy's reasoning, But there's no explanation for any of his arguments aside from like deeply motivated reasoning and him disingenuously attacking Father Mike's points without addressing them. Like there is no more charitable response to this or analysis for this. I hate to see that. That bothers me. Anyway, let's see.
Yeah.
Let's see if he has more of substance too. That's the other thing.
To harm people because of unhealthy societal pressures, uncontrollable compulsions, distortion of one's image, and a number of other reasons. And we have evidence-based treatment to help people get better. But the DSM does not categorize being gay as a mental disorder, let alone any evidence-based treatment to stop being gay. In fact, every credible...
Oh, God damn it. Because it's illegal to study it, you lunatic. Oh, dude. Okay, look. This is okay. First of all, it's illegal to study it because so-called conversion therapy is illegal in all 50 states. You can't do this. You cannot conduct clinical research on it either. So, of course, there are not clinically approved studies because of gay activists who have made it illegal.
Yep.
There we go. Beyond that, though, there's the other factor, which is, again, I have to come back to this because I talked about this when I was talking about the sort of the philosophy of medicine and biomedical ethics, and I touched on psychology, right? Modern clinical psychology, that is like sort of postmodern or at least sort of post-Jungian clinical psychology, as best I understand it, does not try to address anything objective. It only addresses something as a problem if it is perceived to be or felt as or experienced as distressing to the individual having the problem. And so, if a person experiences same-sex attraction and takes that on as a gay identity, a modern clinical psychologist can have nothing to say about that and cannot offer treatment for it because by their professional standards, there is nothing to treat.
Yep.
By contrast, if someone experiences same-sex attraction and does experience it as a problem because they have an objective notion of the ethics of the matter or something, which is really common, actually, by the way. Look into the best example of this would be there's a Catholic outreach program called Courage that is for same-sex attracted Catholics who not just Catholics, but primarily it's a Catholic outreach program, who want to still live a chaste life. And so some of them want to look into psychological treatment because it is something distressing, right? Even by the diagnostic criteria of modern clinical psychology, that would fit, right? The problem is, at that point, you get the activism coming in and saying that, well, it can't be because there is objectively nothing wrong with it, which really does sound like a kind of new introduction of teleology, just in the opposite way.
So you're basically saying that someone could go today and say, well, I don't identify as the gender I was assigned at birth. I want to change that. Okay, doctors say, great. Oh, I'm gay, but I don't identify as gay. I want to be straight. It's like, well, sorry, you can't change that. Sorry, you're stuck with it.
They will, so any professional standard, any like clinically recognized professional standard, and most psychologists or psychiatrists, I should say, psychiatrists are the ones who do treatment. What they will propose to treat is not the same-sex attraction, but rather the shame and stigma at experiencing same-sex attraction.
So they want you to come to terms with it, accept it, and
they want you to accept it and embrace it as an identity. Yes, and that is the like officially recognized professional standard. That's not just like what some activists are doing. That is the result of decades and decades of activism to insert this into professional standards.
And this is very harmful to people who genuinely want help, but they're being barred from.
Extremely. Now, I mean, look, I personally know examples of this sort of thing, where I don't want to like out anybody about this. I mean, this person has been somewhat public about it, but I still don't want to like go into details too much. But I had someone, I know somebody who dealt with same-sex attraction, deals with same-sex attraction, wants to live a chaste life, but because this person was in the military and had access to like federal systems of psychological care and such, that they only really offered any kind of psychological assistance in one direction, and that gave this person extreme psychological distress over years. And it's like it's not it doesn't even fulfill the stated functions of the modern clinical psychologists who hold to this sort of subjective mode of diagnosis and trauma and such. It's a corruption of a medical institution, basically, and it's very clear. Again, it's very clear just due to these explicit logical contradictions. And so he's using he's using the results of decades of activism to try to argue for the initial claims of those activists decades ago. It's again question begging. Really common, by the way, common argument.
Do you think in the future we'll look back on this the same way that we look back on slavery and we're like, we can't believe that actually happened? That's crazy. And people will look back at our time and say, I can't believe that people had sex reassignment surgery or even lived this way, that they thought that was fine.
In terms of sex reassignment surgery, those sorts of things, yeah, I think so. It's really hard to maintain that sort of thing. Culturally speaking. In terms of same-sex attraction and the sort of sexuality movement, I don't know. It's been going strong for 150 years or so. Not quite 100 years, give or take. That's a while in historical terms. So I don't know. If we can get over this, it'll take a while. I can say that much. It'll take a while, or something extremely dramatic from a sort of socio-political standpoint, and I don't think anyone wants that, really.
Yeah.
I don't. Like, I don't want, like, him, personally, to be, like, persecuted or prosecuted or anything due to, even due to his sexual choices, right? That's not a direction I want society to go. Now, I might want him persecuted a little bit for his bad arguments, but only academically, right, to clarify. Hi, Catholic Samurai. Welcome. Welcome to it's not always nearly this spicy, I will say that much. I do I more often chat about no, it's not your fault. I do like doing this from time to time. I mostly do, drier academic content, and then also commentaries and discussions of the philosophy stuff found in video games. So, But if you like this sort of thing, these things do pop up from time to time. It's a little fun. All right, let's keep going. Let's see what he has to say.
Psychological Association says that trying to change your sexuality and denying yourself is actually harmful.
The church only...
Well, okay. I should have waited another 3 seconds, because there you go.
Yes.
There you go. That is exactly the point I was making.
Basically says no to a couple things. One in particular is the genital sexual expression of affection.
What? That is an integral part about getting married, whether it's somebody of the same sex or the opposite sex.
There's
question begging. That completely begs the question as to what marriage is. We want to get into that. It's kind of a long topic.
Nope, because he's just gonna. It's not
he's just breezing on past it. I've talked about it elsewhere, but there's a very, very deep, long question about what marriage is, and whether the notion of same-sex marriage, so to speak, is even coherent. Anyway,
there's no way that the genital sexual expression between two men or between two women meets the what it is for. In fact, acting out on that is directly against the procreative element, and I can't act against it without disintegrating my own heart, my own life.
Says who? This is all just an assertion without any proof and without any means of investigating the claim that it violates the nature of sex. The thing that...
Well, it doesn't have any proof or evidence because you're not playing the proof or the evidence. Once again, like, I don't know. I don't know. I'm gonna keep saying the same thing, but I gotta point it out. I gotta point it out when he does it.
Actually disintegrates the human person, according to actual research, is denying oneself, staying in the closet, trying to change one's sexuality, and hating themselves. That's what disintegrates the human person, not loving someone. And just when you thought this train wreck of a talk could not get any worse, he's about to weaponize a story of his brother coming out to him.
I say something.
Weaponized. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So basically, he said that no, violating the purpose of sex isn't what denigrates us. It's keeping us in the closet. It's forcing those with same-sex attractions to, like, beat themselves up. That's what denigrates us. And yes, having had friends who experience same-sex attraction, I can understand that, yes, like keeping yourself in the closet and like trying to repress that part of you can be very psychologically damaging. But yeah, Father Mike's point is valid and true too. So
Yeah. Well, cool. Now do adultery. Now do theft. Now do pedophilia. Pick your favorite. Pick your favorite sin. You can play the same game. What's really hurting you is suppressing that desire, is trying to change yourself. Which look, yeah, I'll be not maybe the first to admit, but I'll admit that changing yourself, that overcoming sinful temptation is tough. It hurts. It is psychologically distressing, because of course it is. You're dying. Part of you is dying. That's only ultimately possible through the miraculous intervention of grace. But because through baptism we die and are reborn, blah 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 blah. You know the whole thing, right? But yeah, it's distressing. But that's not. But like, so is working out.
Yep.
I don't know. Like here, there you go. Don't even take a moral stance on the thing. Don't even take a moral issue. Just take working out. Look, I'll tell you what's really distressing. All that muscle fatigue from lifting heavy things. I don't want to do that. I'm staying home. I'm going to eat more Cheetos. That makes me feel good. Man.
And yeah, I'm debating whether or not I want to spoil.
No, don't. We'll get to it. Just start shouting or pause when we get to whatever. Feel free to pause, by the way. Yeah, you can do it too.
So, gay.
Pop quiz. What is the correct response when somebody comes out to you?
What are you gonna do? You just shared with me an experience. You experience attraction to members of the same sex. That's all you told me.
The correct answer is not, what are you going to do about it? Or use cult tactics to invalidate somebody's identity by just calling it an experience. Based off of that reaction, what do you think his brother thought growing up? Let's hear.
He would begin to let Jesus love him, and then he said, no, you can't love me, because if people around me knew that this is my experience, then they wouldn't love me.
He thought that because he was right. The priest is making a very calculated and manipulative move here, and you're about to see exactly what I mean.
It took till he was 27 to call me up and say he was hot.
Yeah, I wonder why he waited until he was 27 to tell anybody.
I guess I wish that I would have communicated in some way, that if he wanted to, he could have told me earlier.
Thank you, Father Mike, for understanding the entire point of pride. Wearing a rainbow pin, talking to kids about inclusivity, having access to mental health support, vocalizing the fact that you're an ally. That's exactly how you could have let your brother know earlier that he could have came out. But he was right.
Go ahead. I'm assuming that's something to do with what you're... Go ahead.
No, that's not the point I want to pause on.
It gets worse?
Yep.
Sweet Lord. Okay, so first of all, he does the inverting essence and accident thing again. Right? He's accusing Father Mike of denying his brother's existence or something, right? Which, or denying who he is, or attempting to get him to deny who he is, which again is just...
He said that Father Mike was through Father Mike's approach, Father Mike is manipulating his brother through cult tactics to try and like kind of soften the blow. He wants to tell his brother about the truth about same-sex attraction, so he's softening the blow with all this kind of if I would have known earlier, blah blah blah, and this gay ex-trad thinks that that's extremely disgusting and deceitful.
Dude, okay. What are you gonna do about that? That is okay. Why that is such a brilliant response? Because I think it is. That is maybe one of the best responses I've ever heard to somebody coming out, or to anybody like confessing a sinful temptation or something about themselves that they're not sure about, or they're troubled about, or they're shameful about, or anything like that. What are you going to do? You've shared an experience with me. What do you want to do about that? Where do you go from here? That's such a brilliant response, because I mean, look at how gay Extrat is responding. He's infuriated because this kind of a response fundamentally undermines every little aspect of the entire worldview that forms the basis of sexual identity and sexuality as we understand it in the modern period. That it completely undermines everything that has to do with that entire framework. The reason that our gay extrat up here is pissed off about that to no end is because he doesn't know this guy. He's just hearing this from some guy. It's not his brother, who he knows loves him, saying this. That's a huge difference. And I mean, Father Mike points this out too. Like, he says this explicitly. This isn't the kind of thing that you can just, tell somebody on the internet and hope it works out best, you know? Like, no, it's going to come off as crass. It's going to come off as unfeeling and rude and whatever. Because it is, right? But if it's very clearly somebody who loves you and wants what's best for you and wants to help you, something that does this, that just shatters the flawed worldview that you're either in or at least flirting with, that's brilliant. Because, by the way, this is a technique that I utilize with my students. I try very hard and very often to, whenever I have anything completely like a fundamental thing to introduce, I try and do it like this. I try and do it suddenly. I try and do it dramatically. I try and do it in a way that is very matter of fact. Like, I expect you to just understand this, like, immediately. Or it's not your fault that you misunderstand this, but very suddenly and all at once. So that the difference between how I was thinking about this and how I should be thinking about this is placed dramatically right before your mind. You cannot miss that. And you have this dramatic choice of how to look at the world and how to look at yourself and how to look at your choices. And if that's coming from somebody who you know cares about you in some way or another, even if that's just a professional relationship, but especially if it's a familial relationship, man, that's a brilliant response. It's a brilliant response. I have a hard time even really criticizing it. Really. I don't know what better you can say to something like that. I don't know. You guys have anything else about this, or am I?
No, I'm warning you. I'm warning you, Professor. He's gonna get even angrier.
Hold on. Have any? No. Okay. I'm out of beer, but I have a bit of rum in this decanter. So let's go for it.
Yeah. Gay extrat is gonna get even angrier.
Even gayer. Not in the homosexual way, but in the classical way, meaning, you know, like we used it in the 90s. Yeah, like we used it in the 90s. All right, let's keep going.
Great to be afraid of coming out. The next clip is what Father Mike says that his brother said to him, and I'll take sentences that were never said for 500.
Either you celebrate every decision I make or you think you hate me. It's like, that's not real.
And that sentence was not real. I will take my 500 points.
Okay, I don't think that... Wait, did he even say that was exactly what his brother said, or was that meant to be the implication? I'd have to go back and watch it, but I'm not ready to trust this guy.
He said that the dialogue between Father Mike and his brother is basically fake from here on out.
Well, it's probably embellished. It's not like he was writing it down. It's summarized.
There's nothing worth responding to at this point, Professor.
Okay, moving on.
No good parent accepts every decision their child makes. We love you. We're going to celebrate you. You don't have to agree with every decision you make.
This is exactly why I say Mike is being disingenuous and deceptive here. First of all, this entire framework presupposes being gay is wrong, so they can get away with this rebranding of love the sinner, hate the sin. Second, yes, I agree that parents have a role in...
Small caveat, he presupposes that because he spent the last, 30 minutes arguing for it. That's why he presupposes it. But anyway, let's ignore that and move on.
Helping their children weigh the pros and cons and making each life decision. In fact, your child falling in love is a beautiful thing. Your child getting married, potentially raising a family, that's a beautiful thing. And you and your homophobic family for not wanting to be a part of your brother's life.
I experience a lot of brokenness in my life. And if I were to say that my experience is my identity, then that would mean that I'm broken.
Once again, this entire argument relies on the church's understanding that being attracted to somebody of the same sex is, as the church says, direct disorder. There's not a single person out there who hates themselves in principle for being attracted to members of the opposite sex.
All of us have something in our lives that we hate about ourselves.
What? Yes, I agree that millions of queer people, especially those growing up in homophobic, dangerous institutions, feel shame about things, and it's because of talks like this. So what's the solution? One is evidence-based.
We want to go on a round table and just say something we hate about ourselves, because I can think of a few things very obviously. Like, I am lazy. Let's put it that way. I have a very hard time actually doing something new. I don't want to do it. Even if I know I should, it's uncomfortable. I don't want to, but I recognize that is deeply disordered about myself, and that I should not be that way. Obviously, what else? Something else. I can probably think of more things, but I need to drink more. You guys you can jump in with this if you want, but we see the point. Like, I don't think this is a far stretch. Like, we all have things that we should have things that we're we feel bad about ourselves.
I'll go and I'll say that for the longest time I was a very prideful individual, and now in an attempt to grow in true humility, I've almost gone to the other end of the spectrum and I've become self-deprecating too much. So it's a very fine line to walk.
Oh, hey Mike, welcome back. God bless you too. Mike in the chat hasn't been around in a while, but good to have you.
I could say that one thing I hate about myself is that I internally could be very wrathful, especially when people have wronged me. I hold grudges and wish them ill will when I probably should be more charitable, if not, love your neighbor, pray for your neighbor, that sort of thing.
Yeah. So look, the point though is, look, we can all recognize things that we ought to improve about ourselves, right? And why? Why do we acknowledge those things? It's because we love ourselves. Like, I love me. I want to be good. I want to be better. And that part of that involves recognizing where I'm not better and where I could be. That is this love the sinner, hate the sin thing that he's so dismissive of. C.S. Lewis made this point brilliantly in the I think it was book 4, the last book of Bare Christianity, where he addresses this point specifically about hate the sinner, love the sinner, hate the sin, right? And he points out that there's one sinner that we all always already think of in this way, and it's ourselves. I hate those parts about myself that are insufficient, that are sinful, because I love myself. I want me to be better. And Lewis's point is that is exactly the attitude that God wants us to have about other people. That I should love you enough to want you to be better. And if I happen to know, because you've confided in me, that, hey, this is something that I really struggle with, the loving thing for me to do is to say, okay, what do we want to do about it? It's not to say, no, you shouldn't feel bad about that. You're perfect just the way you are, right? No, that's gaslighting, right? Gaslighting is hatred. And by gaslighting, I'm trying to convince somebody that they're perfect the way they are so that they will remain imperfect so that you'll be better than them, right? That is a way of hating somebody. That's not love. Anything else about this? So far?
But
yeah.
I'm excited because he is about to get to the even angrier part.
How does it possibly get worse? How does it possibly get worse? I'm gonna need. This is not gonna be enough rum.
Solutions. Accepting oneself, learning how to build a healthy life, learning how to build a happy relationship, living life to the fullest extent. But what he's telling you to do here is that you should really just be happier, that you're being forced by the church to be celibate for the rest of your life, that you can never fall in love with anybody else. And if you ever do that, you're going to be shunned by the church and sent to hell.
We've taken this huge concept of love, we reduced it to romantic love. And we've taken this concept of romantic love, and reduced it to sex.
You already admitted that one of God's designs for sex is for bonding between partners, so where are we going?
But there's a deeper love the Greeks called philia. Friendship. It's a more fulfilling love than eros.
Catholics love making these, there's 4 types of love arguments. And it's just dumb because obviously there's a difference between friendship and romantic love. Well, sometimes I get a little bit confused. But you don't get married to your friends or build families with your friend.
In friendship, so much greater than eros, so much greater than romance, so much more life-giving, and so much more like Christ's love.
This is a really...
Okay, so wait. So we don't build families with friendship, but we build communities with friendship. Right? That is something which bridges families together. Friendship is, or at least it should be. And also, I will say, oh boy, is friendship in our society, at least, at a crisis point.
Yep.
Yep.
People are very, especially in the business world, like you hear a lot of this from whether you're in higher education or you're, working. They have this idea that you need to make friendships that will benefit you in your career rather than people that you genuinely, you sort of vibe with. You should have like a very business focused approach, because I've heard people that say, well, you shouldn't be friends with those guys because they're not going anywhere. They don't have really good jobs. They're just, but what if they're my friends that I've had for years, and why would I just throw that away to, to make better business connections?
That's not philia. That is what's the term? There's a really specific term for friendship, for useful friendship. Hold on. Eric is right. I need to turn off Discord notifications somehow.
I thought that was me first.
That was me.
Okay.
Dude, how do I do that? I don't know how to do that. I'll do it. Sorry, viewers. I mean, it was maybe you too, but I wasn't hearing it.
How do you turn off the the notifications so that way I know that I'm not.
You left click on
Disable
the
all
server name.
notification sounds. There it is. Cool. Got it. Excellent. Fixed.
Disable. Is it under user settings?
I figured it out. Yeah, it's under user settings. I figured it out. Anyway, sorry guys. I digress. Yeah, friendship. There is a specific term for useful friendship. It's from Aristotle. It's not one of the four that Lewis talks about, by the way. One of the four loves, because it's not love, it's use, right? It's kind of camaraderie, but it's not love. Now it can turn into love, it can turn into affection, it can turn into friendship, it can turn into romance, it can whatever, but it isn't. It isn't in itself. So you're right. I mean, look, most people have a lot fewer friends than we probably should. That wasn't always true. There was a time, not even all that long ago, when probably a lot of us had more friends than we probably should. So that we had trouble sort of committing to or dedicating any part of our lives to any one or any few friends. But at this point, like, I mean, most of my friends are online people, you folks. Most of the friends that I have nearby are not like, I'm not really in any way close with. Like, it's, put it this way, I don't think there's anybody who I could call up tomorrow and go hang out. Just off the cuff like that. Now there's people around who I could, arrange something and we could plan something out in advance, but like, just say, hey, you and I, let's drop some stuff and let's go hang out tomorrow. No, I don't think I've got anybody really. And I think that's true for a lot of people. And this sort of casual disregard for the importance of friendship is, I think it's contributive to that problem. And then also the combination of that casual disregard for the importance of friendship and this overemphasis on homoerotic physical love, these things kind of tend to go hand in hand. Excuse me. I mean, C.S. Lewis pointed this out like a century ago too, give or take.
So in essence, if there's one thing wrong with society, there's probably a couple more things wrong at the same time.
Yeah.
And they're all connected.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that specifically ties back to the unity of the virtues thesis, which goes back to Plato. Aristotle agreed with it. Everybody agreed with it before 10 minutes ago. It was basically that if you have some virtue, it will help you to develop others. And if you have some vice, it will build and it will spread into other vices. It goes both directions. Yeah, I think that these problems kind of go hand in hand, and he's kind of demonstrating why.
So as long as we're paused, I want to point out this is a good point to mention that when I spoke with Gay Extrad, he had two main reasons for leaving the church. And one of them was when he brought up his struggle with homosexuality,
mm-hmm.
He was basically told to settle for a philia type love, and he was basically told to just settle. And he's like, well, I'm feeling this desire for romantic love, and you're telling me that I need to just settle for friendship, and I don't want to settle, so I'm leaving. That was one of his reasons.
Should I address that, or do you want to talk about
the second reason I'll wait until the end of the video to give the second.
Okay. Yeah, because for that point, again, that just assumes that these are hierarchically ordered, and very simply hierarchically ordered. That first you got kind of casual association, something like storge phase. Thank you. Then that sort of builds into friendship, philia, and that sort of builds into eros, or fucking, so to speak, right? No. those are not, they're not the same thing. You're comparing apples to oranges, right? Yeah, there are comparisons between the two, but they're not the same thing, such that one is just more of the same thing than the other. And to think in that way is to distort friendship, is to dismiss friendship, really. And now also he pointed, I remember he said that, well, I know sometimes friendship and romantic love can the line can get blurry, or that can get confused. It can't get confused. It's just that you can have both, right? You can be friends with your spouse. That's a thing. A lot of people are also friends with their spouse. Like, believe it or not, we're not boomers.
I would hope most spouses are. I would hope most spouses are friends with each other. Otherwise,
I'm making fun. I'm poking fun at the whole boomer humor of the I hate my wife jokes. That's what I'm kind of making fun of.
Remember that joke that says, "Sir, are you?" Where the census taker comes and he's like, "Sir, are you happy or are you married?"
Exactly, it's
And
that.
he
Right. Which, I mean, that comes from this same assumption, right? That, well, part of the same assumption that friendship is just a different, well, that maybe these are mutually exhaustive categories or mutually exclusive categories, which is kind of maybe the opposite error, right? That these are just different things, right? You can have a friendship and you can have an erotic romance, and they might be with the same person. They might not. Maybe they should be, maybe they shouldn't be. Right? That all depends, you know? And it really does get down to the specifics, and it's not sufficient to say that, well, you got level 1 love, level 2 love, level 3 love, and level 3 love is where you add sex into the mix. Like, what? Like, no.
okay. So understanding that it's not a hierarchy is how, because I want this kind of love, but they're telling me to settle for this kind of love, so I don't want to settle, and that's why I'm leaving.
Okay. What about priests? I mean, priests don't get to indulge or experience or fall in romantic love or have
Right.
sex.
And he claims that celibacy is forced, even though that's a discipline and not a doctrine. We've had married priests in the past, and
even if it's a doctrine, it's still a choice, right? It's still a vocation. It's not for everybody. It's definitely not for everybody. We shouldn't pretend it is.
So, right, for the point of priestly celibacy, he
rum?
has claimed that that's an abusive practice that is not allowing priests to have the freedom to maintain romantic relationships.
Well, look, he just kind of, once again, that still just sort of boils down to pelvic issues. He's thinking with his willy. It's a really common error, unfortunately, but it is an error. It's okay to make it a little bit more serious than saying thinking with his willy. I apologize. That's an unserious way of saying this. But what he's doing is he's prioritizing things in fundamentally the wrong way. Right? He's prioritizing a particular kind and a particular instance of physical pleasure and a particular kind of interpersonal relationship. And he's taking those two things and setting them up as his ultimate for the sake of which. That's his God. He's replaced God with...
Yep.
Anyway. All right, let's see what else. Let's see.
Really nice way of saying that straight couples can have amazing friendships and they can also marry people to whom they're attracted. But gay people can only ever have friendships and never actually fall in love with somebody. That's why this entire thing is deceptive and manipulative, because this is all the facade of the same harmful church teachings.
It's deceptive because...
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's deceptive because love is a hierarchy, Professor. I mean,
right. Well, no, it's not that. I mean, that's a point too. But the other point I was going to make here is he's once again assuming that gay people are a species. Right? That is a kind of person, rather than a person, the ordinary kind of person, with certain non-physical characteristics, certain accidents. Here we go again. It's the same thing that we've been pointing out as the fundamental problem since the beginning. Like 2.5 hours ago.
I cannot wait for the day when the church canonizes the first known homosexual man or homosexual woman saint who dedicated their lives to living chastely. The amazing thing is this: that person, that saint, could be in this room.
This is a really convoluted way of saying, if you want to go to heaven, don't be gay. But as a consolation prize, we'll put up a poster of you and you can be a role model for all the other closeted teens out there. Now,
what do you mean by be gay? That's the other fundamental thing here. He's dancing.
Sorry, go ahead.
He's Mountain Baileying, right? He's pulling a Mountain Bailey between between experiencing same-sex attraction and having same-sex sexual relationships, right? Those are two radically different things, and he's not assuming that they're the same. He is oscillating between definitions, right? Because if we stick with his definition of being who you are, quote, being who you are, and having and experiencing same-sex sexual relationships, then that saint that Father Mike was talking about, that hypothetical saint, isn't gay by his definition. They're closeted, they're repressed. If instead what he means is experiencing disordered attraction to the same sex, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing ethically wrong with it.
Right.
So he's oscillating between these two. It's a really, really common rhetorical tactic, and it's a Mountain Bailey fallacy. It's a kind of shifting definition. It's a kind of trade on ambiguity.
Well, I've learned something new tonight, Professor. I did not realize that was a fallacy.
Yeah. What, you haven't watched my informal fallacies lecture? So I'll put it in the description.
Not yet.
I'll put it in the description.
I'll get there.
Let's keep going.
What you're not hearing in this talk, and that he's purposely leaving out, is that he's flipping love the sinner, hate the sin thing on its head, so that all you hear in this talk is be friends and you're awesome. What he's doing is telling teens that are in these harmful institutions who hate themselves, feel alone, saying, well, just be happier about it, because you don't have to say no to your desires. You just have to say yes to other things like loving God, which then still mean that you have to say no to things. He's just wrapping a pile of harmful, crappy beliefs in a bow and calling it a present and asking why you're not happy to receive it.
Yes, saying yes to certain things means saying no to other things. Why do I have to say that? Saying yes to this live stream means saying no to sleep. It's midnight-and-a-half here. I'm up still. Come on, like, sleep would be fine.
If I may,
not alcohol poisoning myself would be fine. But look, I'm here with you guys, and here I am. I'm choosing this because I think that responding to this sort of thing is okay. First of all, I'm having a good time, so there's one. But also, I do think that responding to this sort of thing is a higher good than me getting to sleep 20 minutes earlier or whatever. Like, really. Besides, it's not like I'm going to go to sleep at 12:30 anyway. I don't do that. There's no way.
Oh, Professor, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, I cut you off like 3 times.
No, you're fine. I thought maybe I was muted for a sec. But one thing, or to get something that earlier that Father Mike Schmitz says, I actually saw him in person years ago before.
Oh, yeah?
I think he was already famous on YouTube, but I just didn't know of him. But I went to Steubenville right after I did my confirmation, and that was in San Diego. And he was like the host. And one thing that he said, similar to what he said here, he said that hypothetical gay saint is in this room. They might be in this room. He also was talking about marriage, and he said that your wife might be in this room. And that's one thing that I've noticed he's used that before, and I've seen it firsthand. It's sort of, he gives this idea that like the possibility of holiness or, these possibilities are everywhere, even here in this moment, that it's not some abstract faraway thing, but that it's a tangible thing that's here and now. And I kind of like that he does that.
Yeah, and that's a good reminder that we really should have, right? That being a saint, being holy, is not something that maybe we can do someday. It's something that we're doing right now, or should be, or we can be. Yeah, and he's so good at that. He's great at that little reminder. So was I say was, not because he's dead, but because he's gone a little bit crazy instead of a contest, but Patrick Coffin, the old host for Catholic Answers, was also great about that sort of thing.
That's one thing I want to see you react to, is like take apart set of a contest.
I'm not an expert on ecclesiology. It's outside my wheelhouse, so I don't know how competent I'd be at it. Maybe. I honestly, there's only like 2 arguments against it, but they're so definitive. That's all you really need. So I don't know. Call them a Protestant, and then point out Christ's promise that the gates of hell won't prevail against the church. And then there you go.
Oh, but Professor, we're just in a very long interregnum.
I'm gonna keep going.
But on a serious note, to the outside world, this might not seem convincing. He's talking to a bunch of scared, self-hating, closeted teens living in a dangerous, harmful, homophobic institution, and oftentimes are worried about getting kicked out of the church and out of their families, and trying to...
He's talking to a bunch of guys at a focus conference. What are you talking about? Like, it's not like he's talking to...
Apparently, everyone in the audience is just a closeted gay who's being repressed by this homophobic institution called the Catholic Church. Professor.
Okay. I mean, look. If you believe a lot of the propaganda, the gender theorist propaganda generally, then a lot of these people do in fact believe that the percentage of like LGBTQ, LMNOP, whatever, like take their favorite acronym, that the percentage of people with that identity but who are hiding it, if you ask them, I've seen polls that go as high as like 50%. That they genuinely believe that. Which no. No, that's but that is the point though, is that he is assuming that a lot more people struggle with this than actually do. And that the people who struggle with it in exactly the same thing, in the exact same way that he has, and that's the solution that he has chosen is the right solution for everybody, and even for him. Whew. That's a lot of assumptions baked in there, and a lot of them are just verifiably false.
To pad a 2x4 that he's still going to hit you in the head with. If you're dealing with and exploring your queer identity as a Catholic,
What?
it's a very lonely path. Dealing with and exploring out of their families and trying to pad a 2x4 that he's still going to hit you in the head with. If you're dealing with and exploring your queer identity as a Catholic, it is a very lonely path. But what I can tell you, as somebody who was thoroughly in the church, daily mass, daily rosary, daily adoration, I was going to go off to become a Carmelite monk. Things do get better over time, and you will learn one day to be able to love yourself. I promise you. This video isn't meant to be a complete refutation. It would take a long time to actually break down all of this crazy language that they're using. And this is why nobody on YouTube can actually break down Catholic content, because it's so complex. And words don't mean what you think that they mean from an outside perspective. And I'm more than happy to actually break down what is wrong with theology of the body and teleology. And if there's any other crazy Catholic videos out there that you want me to react to, leave a comment down below. And remember, love wins.
Okay. Neat. So, does he actually ever go into any amount of detail on any of this stuff in those other videos? Because I might want to, if I'm going to react to something, I might want to go for something a little more substantial that he tries to go after something like this.
One of his most recent videos is a video debunking the Catholic view on contraception, and that does go a lot. He retreads a lot of the same ground, but he tries to add more science to back up his claims. So he tries to go more in depth, but I don't know if he'll be.
See, the problem there. I mean, that's maybe interesting, but the problem there is the same problem that he had about halfway through this one, which is that he's not taking a philosophical, ethical, or even theological approach to the question. He's trying to address it scientifically, which is missing the point. So I don't know. Yeah, if you do wind up finding something that is more substantial and more philosophical, let me know, because he does. I mean, he claims to have something like that of a background. I'll also say at the end of these things, I would usually extend the offer to whoever we're reacting to say, hey, maybe let's have a conversation about this sort of thing. But once again, if his philosophical beliefs are what I take them to be, if he is actually like something like a logical positivist, that sort of thing, I don't foresee a productive discussion happening, frankly. So maybe not. I don't know. Anyway.
I will state for the record, Professor, I told you that there were two reasons why he left the church. One of them, as we've discussed, is this idea that
what's that?
That love is a hierarchy. The second reason, and I think it's something that you kind of touched on before, this idea of like we all have things that we struggle with.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, yeah, he told me, he was like, yeah, I was bringing my same-sex attraction to prayer, and people were just telling me to just struggle with it, and I was so tired of struggling that I was just like, screw it, I don't want to be in pain anymore. I don't want holiness and conversion to have to hurt, so I'm just gonna give all the way into sin and live life the way I want to live. So that was his second reason for leaving.
Wow. Okay. Wow. It was too hard.
I get it.
I mean,
on like a psychological view, I empathetically get like, yeah, striving for holiness is hard, but that doesn't mean you should just throw in the towel.
Yeah. I mean, it reminds me a little bit. So I saw today actually there was You remember this was like a year ago. Michael Knowles did a live stream with Nala Ray, the former OnlyFans uh, model. He did another interview with her and her husband today, and why she quit, how she's doing now, her walk with Christ, the whole thing. He was pushing Catholicism on her a little bit. That was fun. Um, but like something that she brought up that I thought was fascinating, and I think it closely relates to this, was that part of why a lot of like hoes, broadly speaking, like OnlyFans people, the chicks on like the whatever podcast, women who are sort of in that world, and men who sort of partake and consume that sort of thing too. Like, part of why they despise her and what she's doing now is because it shows that it's not impossible. Right? It proves that you don't have to be stuck in sin. You can stop. Right? Michael Knowles said something like this too. He brought up that, well, that was it that I'm trying to remember exactly how he said it. It was pretty good that he had talked to somebody who presumably was a lot like Gay Trad here, who he talked to them and they had said to him, like, look, it would involve this whole conversion thing, and it would involve giving up all the giving up sins. It would involve changing my entire lifestyle, and man, that's really difficult. There's so much that goes into that, and Knowles was like, really, like, come to confession and you're done. That's it. Just like, you can be done with this like tomorrow, like easy. And he said, well, look, no, I'm too far gone for all that. It's not. But to see, that's actually why I kind of like to see people like ex OnlyFans, people like that, converts, who were way lost, because it gives a reason for hope. For you, for you if you're struggling, for other people that you care about who are also kind of lost, because a lot of these former OnlyFans type people remind me of a bunch of my friends from like college, or former friends at this point. But it's that recognition that it's difficult but possible. That can be the hardest thing to deal with, and you might not want to, and you might have to run away from that. Anyway, all right. Anyway, I regardless of my my bits of frustration, I had a good time. So thanks for bringing me this one.
I
I don't know if we're gonna
I'm
do more of these this guy, but maybe if we find some good ones.
I'm glad, Professor. I don't know if you would want to check out more of his stuff, because the level
Maybe.
of argumentation is about the same. So I think we might be done with this gentleman.
Perhaps.
But I don't know. Random things keep popping into my YouTube feed, Professor, and if I ever come
Keep
across,
letting me know. I do like doing these reactions. So definitely. I mean, look, if you look at, I made it. By the way, I should mention, I made a playlist of all of my reaction stuff, my reactions and responses and EFAP style thing, these sorts of things. What I think is my first one on street epistemology and philosophy of religion is not exactly high level argumentation that I was examining, and I sort of made it as a sort of because someone was having trouble answering some of the challenges and for it, acquaintance of mine, and so I just made it, and then I started using it for my philosophy of religion class, because it actually does wind up addressing a lot of even some of the issues that we kind of talked about here. So check that out if you want. Otherwise, it's getting late, so good night, everybody. I'm gonna finish my rum at some point. Thank you guys for joining me. Thank you everybody who's watching for joining me. And see you next time.